and welcome to the next episode of The Podcast, a cannabis podcast for budding enthusiasts. This episode, we are incredibly lucky to have Jessie of Biovortex to come on the show today, chatting all things Black Dog, his breeding plans, regenerative farming, and so much more. As always, we're incredibly grateful for our fantastic sponsors, Seeds Here Now, #1 in the game, guarantee on satisfaction, not just germination. Check them out, all the latest drops, the hottest breeders. If you want it, they've probably got it. I recommend them. Big shout out to our friends at Koppert Biological. They got everything you need to keep your garden pumping, happy and healthy. Be it beneficial predators, beneficial feeds to keep those guys alive, or microbial solutions. Check them out to keep your garden happy and healthy, producing top quality. Likewise, a huge shout out to our friends at the Patreon gang. They're truly the lifeblood of the show and we're incredibly grateful for their support. If you want access to early content, additional episodes, or heck, even a few little bonus goodies, go check it out. Patreon.com/the podcast. I hope you're ready for a good one. Let's strap in and let's get into it. Alrighty, so a big thank you and welcome to the regenerative farming warrior and exceptionally talented breeder, Jessie of Biovortex. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed your show so much over the years.
Oh man, you're too kind, and I appreciate the kind words you gave me at Emerald Cup last year. I was in the audience. I didn't expect that, so that was really nice of you.
Oh, it felt really good to have you in the audience too. It was like cool, I've listened to the way. I've got a lot from hearing breeders get to go into their thought process and just the way that you create this format. I feel that you get a real stream of consciousness that I've gained so much from. And you've had a lot of my friends on here too that I've worked with over the years. And, we've talked a lot and I get to even gain a lot from listening to them on your show, even after years of experience. So I really appreciate that format and to have you in the audience at the Emerald Cup when we did the regenerative cannabis breeding panel. And also we did another California, just Humboldt breeders panel that had just an amazing group. And I was happy to have you in the audience to get to hear it. And thank you.
No, you're too kind, my friend. So the first question we like to ask our guests, what have you been smoking on recently?
Well, today it's mostly been Black Dog with a mixture of Banana Dog rosin from Garden of Greece, and not rosin, actually, it's straight ice water hash. It just was pressed out a little bit. And then also some 24K from Resin Ranch. It was just exceptional flavored, great citrus. Some cherry lime dog flowers too, which is just kind of one of my favorites. That combination between Mean Gene's cherry lime pop and the Black Dog, and been playing with that for the last several years. And some of my favorite aromas and flavors have come out of that. So that's a pretty constant one, but that's what I've been smoking on today.
Wow, what a lovely little selection there. There's a few things I'd love to chat about. I mean, we're definitely going to chat cherry lime dog because that's of huge interest to me. But just to quickly backtrack, you said the 24K. That's an interesting one because the citrus terps have been dominant for a while and now they're kind of like almost making a comeback, but in like a sort of a changed form, like with other stuff brought into it. What's your thoughts on citrus? Do you think we've reached the peak? Do you think we've passed it? Where do you predict it?
I think there's a lot of different types of citrus. There's certain citrus that works more or less with other people. You have those hazy citrus, you have the piney citrus, you have sometimes it's more on the lime, some more lemon. So you get straight mandarin. You have full lemon, like a lemon tree or something, or mandarin, like mandarin or nectarine, or you have, there's a lot of different ways citrus expresses itself. And what I like about the 24K is it's, I feel like it's it's kind of the juice and gas. It's like the sweet orange citrus with a bit of that gas and earth that I I really enjoy that a little bit more than maybe some of the super spiky, hazy citrus, which I also enjoy too. But I for all the time, I kind of like that little bit more gas with that citrus. And I think like the mandarin and that 24K seem to deliver that really well. And they yield pretty well in ice water hash too.
Yeah, lovely. What a bang on description. And I mean, while we're talking about it, what's your thoughts on like the kosher and the Jew gold? You know, they're kind of the two gassy OG things, which I don't feel get as much of a mention as some of the other OG cuts. How do you find them? Do you like them?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and I mean, it's difficult too to know like if we're talking about the same thing all the time too, whether it's a certain cut that was the basis for something, or whether it's the feminized seeds that were put out in Europe, and what is your definition of that variety? But I mean, yeah, I enjoy those gas flavors. There's if it's coming from a long line of very similar OG cuts, and it's just different versions of a similar thing. That I've enjoyed since I was, since the late 90s, early 2000s or so. So, I've always enjoyed those flavors and stuck with them.
Lovely. Well, we'll have to get into that, but just as one last quick question on this subject, what's your favorite OG if you had to pick one?
I mean, it was good from the beginning. Just the standard kind of the first OG cut that we saw like really in circulation in around probably 2002. I mean, and it's very similar to the SFV, very similar to Tahoe and Trinidad, Lost Coast OG. Yeah, they all had that same kind of thing. And sometimes it's like, is it just being grown in a different spot or not? It's hard for me to fully know. And I don't have all of them saved or the records to know like what's what, but I don't have a favorite because they were all so similar. It's really how it was grown at the time too. Like, is this a real living soil expression? Is it just perfectly done organic indoor? Is it a really nice light depth? But yeah, and then just having that addictive banging kind of gas flavor at the end. It's interesting what OG did with our area. It created an appellation of its own in like a very free market kind of way. The fact that there was this variety that had this addictive flavor that we were growing out in the hills in light depth and getting incredibly beautiful flowers that were better looking than indoor and better, especially anyone who messed up their indoor, which was most people. So like, people could come from all over and just make a ton of money on selling this stuff at top shelf indoor flowers because it blew away their indoor flowers. And it created really an appellation because it was a flavor and a standard of this area that happened with Light Dep and OG. And it really made a lot of history and a lot of economic strangeness.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true, and it makes me wonder. Let's say you had to make a bit of a pie in the sky guess, but let's say 25 years from now, most countries around the world are legalized. Do you think America would look into really pushing that Appalachia sort of thing a bit harder with specific strains in the way we see like wines and stuff? Or do you think people are still going to just pick different genetics each year and do their thing?
Well, it's definitely happening. And there's really smart, amazing, excellent farm and breeders and advocates that are working towards that. And luckily these are a lot of the people who very much support the regenerative cannabis farming movement and these ideals, and they're putting, and also real science. And so, there is an appellation project in Humboldt that's going into place right now. Dr. Holly Hall is helping head a lot of the research and the fundraising for the getting 9 different weather stations that will be put in different legacy farms with good practices, and we can start recording all of the environmental data from high quality weather stations that will be properly monitored. And then Janine Coleman has been leading this amazing Appalachian project from Mendo and in Humboldt, and has been doing just this incredibly difficult work because it's such a complex issue. And like, we're dealing with, cannabis is so complex to begin with, and then appellations, and then we're dealing with everyone's different perspectives and everyone's different cultures and everyone's different spot and what's special about their place and what's special about their genetic and what's special about their terroir. And also, like, who do you include and what doesn't get included? And like, is a plant grown in a pot in a greenhouse or an indoor in that location qualify as an appellation when we're talking about environmental expression? So, things like, do the roots need to be in the ground? Is it okay if there was other added potting soil or amendments? Is it okay if there's some environmental controls? And so, there's a lot of things to kind of hash out. I'm on the side of like, as long as those roots are tapped into that soil and that it is part of that environment and it's not environmental control and you don't have artificial lights, then that's qualifying for an appellation. The second you go indoor or an environmentally controlled greenhouse, or the second that you have a pot that does not allow the roots to go into the ground, then I think that those suspend the idea of an appellation, because you're taking out the environmental aspect of it, which is such an important part of it. Of course, the culture part of it, the breeding, the art, like all of that is a huge part of an appellation too. It's like, how do you grow a cultivar? Like, what are you breeding for? And then what are you doing with that? That all is part of it too. But I do think that the environment has to be a part of that as well. So I'm really excited about all the amazing people that are working on this, and amazing farmers too, like Moon Made Farms, Tina Gordon. Just so many are doing a lot of work. And actually the women have been spearheading this pretty hard, like just a powerful group of incredibly intelligent, powerful people that are doing the work that I'd want to see done. So, there's so many ways to get these things wrong. And I'm really concerned about things that could restrict freedoms. I don't want people growing only one kind of cultivar in a place, because that goes to monoculture, that goes to all these different issues, or restrict a farmer from breeding in their own environment. Like, the whole point is to establish these things that are a part of the culture, a part of the farmers, a part of the breeders, a part of making something that makes sense for that area. And I think biodiversity goes with that. So it's like, you don't just be like, oh, this place is known for this variety, this cultivar, because that same farm should be able to grow a type 1, a type 2, type 3, type 4. They should be able to, like, CBD, THC, they should be able to have things that are harvested early, things that are harvested late, that are different sizes that make sense in their environment. So, and that's a very dynamic landscape. If you think of like a Green Source Gardens, like you think of all of the breeding that they're doing, and then all the different growing that they're doing. And that's, to me, like very much what an appellation is, but they are working on so many different cultivars at the same time and having a full polyculture mixed in with there, like many of the other regenerative farms, like Moon Gazer Farms. They're just great examples of that. And it's kind of hard for bureaucracy to understand that kind of like freedom and polyculture. And, but I'm hopeful that maybe this is the place where we can do it.
Yeah, wow. What a really knowledgeable little burst of info there. I think people have to redo that. I'm interested to know, because I got 2 questions from 2 fans, and one of them was related to, they were kind of interested in trying to do what you're talking about in their own little setup, and they were saying, do you think it would be beneficial to get that whole process going to kind of do your own IMO and try to like culture your own indigenous microbes from your area, as opposed to, say, using like maybe an EM1 or like a good microbial source, but it's external? Would you recommend that like that could be a viable way to get some microbial activity going that's related to your terroir, or do you think it's a bit more complex than that?
So this is a cultivator that's asking about living soil cultivation.
Yeah.
Is this indoor, outdoor? What kind of situation are we talking about?
I think that they recently moved to a new property and they're looking to grow outdoor, and they were kind of wondering, like, the first time you grow something, is there terroir there immediately, or does it have to develop over time, and do I need to use IMOs and things like that?
Well, the terroir is there, but yeah, I mean, like any gardening and the whole idea of regenerative farming is the fact that you make something thrive more every year. So you do the things that build nutrition, that generate more life just by going through, you know, the cycles of things. And so by cover cropping, in the fall. So after you've grown your crop, you immediately start your cover crop before the rains come, and that grows over the winter. And all the nitrogen fixing bacteria that work with the root nodules in something like fava beans or something like peas or bell beans or vetch, those are pulling nitrogen from the air and they are fixing it into the ground just through the process of photosynthesis and through the process of having a mutualistic relationship with bacteria, that they literally create these nodules to house the bacteria. Like they grow these big things, and they put out resources to make sure that they are housing and taking care of these bacteria that can process the nitrogen from the air, which literally is one of the most difficult things to break apart, is a triple bond. That's the hardest bond to break apart. And N2 in the air is two nitrogens together in a triple bond. The only thing that has enough energy to break that apart is a lightning bolt. And so like when lightning hits, like some of that nitrogen in the air becomes free and it can attach to water and oxygen and different things in the air, and then rain down as actual usable nitrates for the plant. So you actually get some nitrogen in your rains when there's thunderstorms. But the bacteria have the enzymes that can start working on those triple bonds, and they can take them apart. So the plant houses basically a laboratory that allows these enzymes to work. And so just by planting these seeds, all of a sudden you're able to pull the most difficult thing, that's the nutrient that everything needs to build proteins, that's locked up in our air, and should be too. By the way, the nitrogen cycle, it's really important to keep it the way it is, and we've really messed it up by artificially producing nitrogen through the Haber-Bosch process, where we're actually using pressures and a catalyst and hydrocarbons to fuel it all to make nitrogen. And what we do is we've literally put more than twice the amount of nitrogen into the system that should be there. And so you see a lot of issues with rivers, with water quality, with die-offs, with blooms of algae, with toxic blooms, and with full-on die-off because all the oxygen's robbed from the water. So it's a really big deal that we think about nitrogen in a way that is regenerative, that is the way that the planet has always done it, because it's always kept it in a balance, and it's allocated those resources in an amazing way. So much of it's locked up in the sky. The bacteria can release the right amount for plants to be able to use. Lightning, releases the right amount. And then we've just completely changed that, just like we have with so many other things, and CO2 in the air. And that's the other thing that you're doing when you're cover cropping, is you're actually taking carbon from the air and you are storing it in these plant cells and in the roots, and they're growing and they're taking more carbon from the air. That's what photosynthesis is. It's taking carbon from the air and it's building plant matter with it. You get organic material from that, and that's also like with cannabis, that's where we get all our phytochemicals, all our medicine. It's literally coming from pulling carbon from the air and growing from that through relationships with roots and with microorganisms. And doing that in balance is just what we need to do with everything in life. And so just the simple process of putting out a cover crop seed at the right time, you pull in carbon, you build it into the soil, that carbon is stored in the soil, it feeds more microbiology. And while you're pulling that carbon, the microbiology in the root nodules are pulling in the nitrogen and making that a nutrient-rich soil. And all you have to do is mulch that back in the spring and plant, and you've just built soil and you've built fertility while doing a positive thing for the earth. And then those plants get to grow with all of the nutrition and the organic matter that you just grew out of thin air in a way.
What a fantastic explanation of nitrogen fixation. I definitely think people need to listen to that one again. I really enjoyed that. So I guess as maybe just a follow on in relation to our listener's question, let's say you did exactly what you said. You'd done some nice cover crop and you've plowed it in and you're looking to go again this season.
Well, it doesn't have to be plow. Plow makes a lot of sense. Certainly in dry farming, plowing is the way that it is done for, well, in certain places like riverbanks and stuff. You plow it in, it gets eaten quickly, and then you actually disturb the soil in a way that works for the dry farming process. I prefer in certain locations mulching in, so you can figure out what you have on a property that would work to mulch something in, whether it's a bunch of cardboard or maybe wood chips, old depth covers for a moment. Although the plastic you want to be careful about because you only want to do a certain amount of time and make sure that the oxygen and that you aren't harming, but you are just returning organic matter to the earth. But, worms will come up as soon as something's covered and start eating it. You get all the millipedes, you get all kinds of diversity of creatures that get all this food that they get to eat. And then you just, you talk about like frass or like, or compost teas, like what's happening on the top of this surface is just everything you could never even buy in the store. It's every positive thing you could imagine. And it's just piles of it that just happen, overnight, constantly. They just come up and they eat and they poop and they give everything that the plants want as this layer of organic material goes back. So, I'm a big fan of mulching. Sometimes the tilling makes sense and there's certain farmers that really know what they're doing and they know how to maximize production and, really reduce resource use. In other cases, maybe that's not the thing to do for that because you want to encourage a different type of soil life and, whether that's using rotational grazing or whether it's fully mulching and developing more perennials. There's lots of different strategies. But yeah, I would encourage mulching as well as not just tilling.
Yeah, of course, and my bad using the wrong wording there. We're definitely
no, you didn't. No,
no-till.
Because both are very are needed and viable and make sense in their applicable scenarios.
Yeah. So before we get too in depth, because we're definitely going to go further down the organics rabbit hole, take me back. What was your first experience with cannabis?
Kind of as early as my memories are, just watering beautiful plants as a baby. And then next would be Monday Night Football. There was a roommate who old peace activist, and he actually had a radio show too on KPFA, and it was about social justice. And but every Monday night, everyone would go into his room and watch Monday Night Football. And I remember really enjoying when people talk like this as they passed the joint and held it in. It was like, man, everyone's super nice when they talk like that. And, just fun watching, a football game with a bunch of happy adults that are, very carefree and enjoying each other. And the smell was wonderful, just this wonderful lingering smell in the air and just positive memories. And then, as a teenager, just starting to smoke with friends and also just being interested in the seeds too and watching the plants grow. Like I kind of, both started around the same time, pretty early for me too. I think 13, 14 is when it was about the right age for me to start perking my interest back into something that I'd seen. Although where I grew up, there was no more growing. It was only early when I was a kid, and then they made a decision that just with legal issues that they were not going to risk the property. I actually grew up. The property I grew up on was Joan Baez's old place. It's a place that was named by her, Struggle Mountain, and it's connected to nonviolent movements and the movement against the Vietnam War and multiple social justice movements, as well as being connected to this thing called the Land, which was a area up there that basically intentional communities were built on land that was accessible at that time. And so they built all kinds of cool houses. They had irrigation. There's spring systems. There's a long hall for meetings and for dances, and there was back to landers and there was frontlanders that were more political. Back to landers were more about living off the land and the gardens, and so there's a rich history there, and they like cannabis and stuff, but decided that the properties and stuff of that area just wasn't worth the legal risk during the time, and I grew up during the Reagan era and the war on drugs, which always seemed like just a horrible crime against human rights and humanity. And I can't wait to see that as something so far in the past, and just as something it's just a disgusting, horrible thing that destroyed so many lives. And I can't wait till it's over.
Yeah, certainly. So what were some of the earliest strains you can remember when you first were getting into cannabis? Or was it at a time when it was still like the kind and it wasn't really named?
Yeah, it was a little bit in between. It wasn't so much about the names as it was interesting things. So like we had the Monday. It was this certain variety that was super good that like my friend would get every Monday. We had the crackhead, and it was just so strong and so stimulating that it was just like crack, and it smelled so good. And that's actually one I super long for. I would love to find that profile again, because it was actually very addictive too. Other things, a lot of things just weren't. They were just really good. You just call something like, well, it's a golden indica, it's beautiful. And that was the flavor profile and the way that it grew. I remember coming up to Humboldt, so I grew up with like Santa Cruz mountains and also the indoor. And it was extremely wealthy area in Palo Alto. As far as kids, we didn't have any money or anything, but like all the kids around me were tremendously wealthy in general. In that area, it's the booming of Silicon Valley. And so actually the weed was incredibly good because there's the economic driver for it to be. I remember we just didn't see swat, Mexican or brick or even like B buds or like forever. Like honestly, we just had because you're buying 8s and 12s and this stuff, like at least the kids are, and and it had to be really good. I mean, the quality standards were super high. So honestly, we started with like the best. And then I remember like somebody like coming with like brick weed, and just like everyone's like, oh, it was a novelty for a second, and everyone had a headache. And by the next day, like I don't think you could sell it for any price, but you could sell a gram for $20 the next day, But yeah, interesting times. And coming up here, well, I remember the first time coming up in Humboldt, still in high school and stuff, and we got some honeydew, which at the time it was like, is that the name of the variety or the place that it came? And it was so good. It had that kind of pre-98 Bubba look and structure, but it was just extra gooey. It had kind of a honeydew smell, that made you even think like, is it called honeydew because of that? But I know it had to come from honeydew. And it was probably light depth too. That was, looked better than, a lot of the indoor people are used to as well. So, if you paid the right price, freaking, you got fucking fire back then. So yeah, we grew up on insanely good herb, and I loved putting away like the really nice seeds. I always just wanted to grow all the time. And was just really interested in seeds and really interested in putting different things together. So I just always saved and categorized in like any nug that it came from. I'd like save the nug and save the seed with it and write down information about it. And so when I had, started doing my first programs, I had all this information just literally from the flowers. It wasn't like, oh, I bought it from here and I know that it's this or that. I just from my own observations and the nugs that it came from.
Wow. And back at that time, did people talk about seeds you found in bud as though it was like, oh, you shouldn't grow those, or was it more accepted that you could get some nice stuff out of seed you found in bud?
I mean, if the flower is super nice, then it's a treasure. Like I think you might as well look. Why not? And also, there wasn't so much information or misinformation going on where people didn't necessarily have set ideas of what is a good thing or a bad thing or not. And God, I mean, if you pull a seed out of a flower that was just like the best flavor and best effect, like that's a freaking treasure. Put it away and see what happens.
100%. And so as you accumulated your kind of little treasure trove of...
I called it the vault. It was the vault.
I love it, the vault. I think everyone needs to get the vault going. And was this kind of what spurred you to get growing initially? And were those seeds some of the first ones you planted? How did that go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, doing cool guerrilla grows and with springs and nice forest soil and growing some of those varieties, and then doing, probably, it was 98 doing indoors up in Arcade, actually moving up here at that time in Humboldt, and running through the vault. And what I did was I just named all kinds of different things. Mostly, I was pretty into Greek mythology, and so I'd name them different Greek names. And one of the ones that stood out was Athena, and that's a cultivar that's still with me today.
Wow.
As far as like through the breeding, there's 25 years of different projects with her.
Wow, that's really impressive. I mean, it makes me wonder, what do you have any specific end direction, or it's just more of like a blank canvas and you just see where it takes you?
Oh, she's taken me a lot of places. It's a canvas. It's honestly, it's not an end direction. It's the plant teaches me.
Yeah, what a brilliant sentiment. So the question I love to ask breeders, when you made your first cross, was it an accident or was it intentional, and what happened?
Well, the first cross that I'd call a cross that went to something else as far as making a clone selection and then other people growing that clone selection out was actually just the Bubba selection that made up here with a friend back about 2001, crossing that onto, and that became actually the Bubba that was pretty much grown up here and became the main Bubba, and mixing that with the Athena that I was talking about, that selection, and that was Athena Kush. And that actually was growing quite a lot up here, and it was just an amazing hybrid between them. Just insane, giant trichomes, amazing resin production, really great division between flowers, just tons of beauty. And it couldn't get powdery mildew, which a lot of people really like. So it ended up getting grown quite a bit in that clone variety form. So all throughout the early 2000s, that was a pretty popular variety in the Humboldt area.
Hell yeah. And so do you feel like that was kind of what really lit the passion to start breeding for you, seeing that success people were having, or was it was already there? It was just, nice to see people enjoying it.
I've always been interested in plants and putting things together. But yeah, that success of that was, that was definitely a great spark to continue to see all the different cool things you can put together and what can come out of that, and also being able to see how those come out on all these different farms. Because way back then I was already doing this, where I got to go see something you worked on grown in all these different places and seeing the different expressions. And it's just massively interesting to me, and it's never stopped being. It's like what I do every year. It's just I go to all the farms and see everyone growing all the seeds and try to take in as much information, as much art, photography, much as much understanding of their practices, and then hopefully knowing everything about the flowers and the products that get made from it afterwards, because it all is just amazing information for the next generation.
Great answer. And you know what? It segues really brilliantly into something I think we both wanted to touch on a little bit, which is kind of, you're talking about how there's all these different facets that you like to approach cannabis from, not just growing it, but the photography, the information, the research, documentation. And I think that it raises the overall question kind of, what is Biovortex to you? Because I've seen you post online, and I'm assuming that maybe not everyone has seen it, but it was a great post. So I'd love for you to be able to tell the listeners, what is Biovortex? Is it just a name? Is it something a lot more than that? How would you pitch it?
Yeah, it's been a thing of confusion a lot, because it's like, oh, is this is it just a genetics company? Are you selling Vortex brewers? Or are you a living soil consultant? Or, I do all these things, I guess. Like, I make seeds, and I make, and I've made Vortex brewers, and I've made living soil and consulted on that and helped all that. But really at the base of it, and also just the whole, the Regenerative Farm Award and all of that kind of education towards that at the base of Biovortex, it is a conceptual art piece. That's what it was from the beginning and continues to be. And the concept of it is to influence the cannabis industry towards a more ecological future, one that's thoughtful about plant genetics, that is thoughtful about social justice, that is thoughtful about the soil, about the earth, about how we cultivate, about the end users, that putting all of this thought into how we do something. And what I thought was really powerful and about connecting these concepts with cannabis is how much attention cannabis has right now, and how much economic attention and medical attention that it has, that if we can really show these types of farming practices, about these kinds of community ethical practices in the way that we produce a healing product, that we can really drive and change the way we look at marketing, the way that we look at medicine, the way that we look at agriculture, and forge a better future through that understanding. And so the Trojan horse of all the enthusiasm of cannabis, I want to put these concepts into it. And what's amazing is cannabis is a consciousness uplifting plant that allows for these ideas to soar. And so many different people that have been inspired by some of these concepts have done so many amazing things, or have already been doing the work before. But there's a mutualism and a synergy between all the people that are working towards these goals that I think is incredibly beautiful, and really that's what I want to cultivate and encourage. And so it's a conceptual art piece that wants to build community and awareness of ecology and all of the amazing things that this plant can do for our mental awakening, for our society, and for social justice.
Yeah, what an incredibly detailed and really kind of altruistic kind of body of work you've got going on there. A question we commonly hear from our listeners is that they struggle to conceptually see how the small farm can progress going forward as things get harder to operate. Do you think operating under these sort of ideals and guidance is a way in which smaller people can still make things possible to operate and maybe, earn a living from?
Well, I think like all things, it's just like things diversify. There's so many different things that cannabis produces. So no, I don't know if like small farms make sense for large biomass for phytochemical companies. I don't know if it makes sense for, large biomass for fiber, but maybe it does. It depends on your end product, your marketing, and then like who you're working with. And I know that there'd be amazing people doing that. But hopefully, that the practices are good regardless of the scale, and that as a community that buys these products, that we are aware of these things, and that we hold people responsible for how they are producing things, and really think about the environmental impacts in certain large scale and monoculture and what we want to see from that. As far as the small farm staying viable, I think actually as far as the more, I hate the word recreational because I think it's all medical, but like the craft and the, and connoisseur market, that it's only going to be small farms, because I think that it only goes one direction as far as understanding of quality. You don't experience true quality and go backwards. You don't experience the quality of an amazing dry farm peach, from an amazing farm, and the quality of that flavor, it can't be reproduced. You can't just buy it and have it shipped somewhere. You can't, recreate a Michelin star restaurant that has a relationship with a small farmer near them. So I think we already understand that quality. But we have a lot of work to do as far as education for the consumers, just even in California, but throughout the world. California might have a very sophisticated market in general, but there's a lot of work to do there in understanding practices. And so that's part of the Regenerative Cannabis Farm Award, is not just about products, not just about the flowers, which is of course king. And, it's we need to know what everyone loved smoking on the most. But let's talk about the practices. And, some of these farms do quite well in the contest as well, with the insane products that they're coming to the table with. And so we get to actually look at the practices of these farms. How are they growing? How are they using water? How are they interacting with their community? What medicines are they making? And this is how we created a matrix to judge these different farms. And we go out on a site visit, and we will get the whole tour, go through everything, ask the questions, and then later we run it through this matrix of all these different aspects of what regenerative can mean. And a lot of it is ecological, but there's also the community and medical and social justice aspects of that as well. And Dan Marr of High Tide Permaculture has done an amazing job developing that with me, with an amazing permaculture and science mind, ecology that is put into it is it's very thoughtful, and we get to kind of understand something about these farms. So having these awards so people can see a little bit more about these farms, and making movies about them, and so people can see the practices and know that they want a flower grown like that. They want a flower that's grown with love, that helps the environment. They want a flower that comes from a farm that is a part of cannabis community, that is a part of their watershed and their environment, their forests, that are true stewards, as well as growing just insanely fire herb.
100%. And do you think that we can get to a point one day where the average consumer could take all of these factors into mind and truly appreciate the quality of a product that comes from one of these farms and view that as the best? Or do you think that it's hard for consumers to understand all of the inner workings and why this regenerative farmed product is so superior? It's
hard. But it gets easier every year, and it takes a lot of cooperation. And I'd like to see more on the dispensary ends. There's some that are really cool. Soulful, from a very early point in Sebastopol, California, had been excited about these regenerative farms and wanting to convey all the information they could about them, and have done an outstanding job with that. And then now we're really lucky to have our dear friend Crystal, who has opened up the Humble Urban Market in Arcata, and I think like no other dispensary, it's going to really be able to tell that farm story, because she is such a deep part of cannabis community, important part of so much of the policy developing appellations, and but and just working with all the farms and just being just a positive pillar in the community. So I'm just so happy to have someone like that, being able to help educate the public to the amazing farming practices that are happening on some of these farms, the quality differences, and just giving them access to really quality medicine.
Yeah, certainly. So let's go back. Give me the rundown. How did the creation of Black Dog go down? I think a lot of people are interested in what the genesis story was. How would you describe it?
Well, it starts with my dear friend Ryan with Humboldt Seed Organization and projects that we were doing together from an early point, back in even a little ways into like the Athena Kush days. Like I got to meet him through my neighbor, and we, instantly we're close friends. And he was very ahead of the game, understanding where, what was happening with seeds, and, saw the work that I was doing and saw the potential and all of the things that were happening here, and did an amazing job bringing that to really the whole world. And so with projects that, we were working on together, just a regular blackberry, mother with the emerald headband which is a California sour diesel with a lemon OG. And that, it was kind of the genesis of the Black Dog. And working with that in 2012, I made a selection that was like just exactly what I wanted. And I actually originally called it like Trimmer's Delight, because it literally took less than 2 hours to trim a pound. So like, it was just like, okay, that's way too much money. But it was a dessert, it's like, okay, cool. When you finished a hard job, like, okay, here's dessert. Like you get to make a bunch real fast. But, and then of course, I like to just trim it myself too, but,
Yeah.
So anyway, that clone got saved, and then I just continued working with that, and that kind of became the canon for what I was doing with it. And then really, Black Dog's still being made, that was 2012, and every year I've done multiple different variations of back crosses, or continuing sibling generations, as well as probably at this point maybe crossed it onto 250 maybe different things or more, and then multiple generations from multiple different crosses from that. So it's kind of this fun flagship project where it's just like, I'm going to do everything you could possibly do with this plant, like just unbelievable, like stored potential in one plant. And so like, just from shit all over the world, all the different things, like I've probably put it on Black Dog at some point. So I don't know. There's something about having this one plant with the stored information of such a vast worldwide genetic potential.
Yeah, certainly.
As well as having this super inbred line. Getting that consistency. And it's what I really love is just like hearing all the positive stuff from people's experience with it. It's been a lot of people where it's helped them with medical issues, with addiction issues, with mental health issues, like that it puts them in a place that helps them. There's something about the chemotype, the terpene and the cannabinoid combination. It's, nothing like specifically unique, and it's not super potent or anything, but it's just, there's something, the way it like connects you with nature, balances you, like it, and people seem to have a very similar experience. And it's just so fucking pretty to watch grow. And she's a special one.
Lovely. So I assume you've heard a plethora of feedback from people about it, but are there any kind of traits or properties?
Well, it's pretty neat to see the hashtag Black Dog Kush, and I made sure to put the Kush on the end so it's not buried in a pile of Labradors and stuff, which would happen. Yeah, it's like if everyone just tags Black Dog, it's like no one's gonna see that hashtag. I'll promise you. But if you do Black Dog Kush, it's like it's pretty good. But there's thousands from all over the world, and it's really amazing to see, and super thankful with the relationship with my friend Ryan and Eric and the Humboldt Seed Organization with getting that everywhere. It's really, really cool to see.
And are there any characteristics or problems you feel it's particularly good for? Like, for example, if someone was having like low energy, or like, is there anything which stands out you think it's quite good for if patients were having that issue?
I think it's good for what it's good for the person. I wouldn't pigeonhole it. But the one thing that has been consistent, though, is a connection with nature and a balancing, which helps with a lot of things, I think.
Yeah. Sure. So do you prefer in general to kind of work lines till you've got a pretty good idea of what's going on, or are you a bit more like, let's do some F1s and kind of see what comes out of it?
Well, I mean, every year I work a few lines. I figure out what is possible, and maybe that's 1, maybe it's 4, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 2, and then on top of that, I just try to do every freaking thing I can. So I make I make all kinds of polyhybrids. And I try to set things up. I make probability waves is kind of how I think about it. And so I set multiple different timings up, and I have my like super planned out, like my 4 projects like I'm doing this year that are like, I'm doing my Cherry Lime Dog BC 1 F3s, and I'm making the Cherry Lime Dog F4s. And I'm doing a very concentrated, effort towards making those be exactly what I want them to be. But at the same time, I have maybe 100 different varieties that are staggered at different times that will be for different projects. And I will just try to see what makes sense at each time. There's a lot of thought going into how I set it up. But the thing is, the way the probability wave collapses, I might not know until the days that they come. As you smell a variety, that you see their resistance, that you see their profiles, and that you see, what kind of male might work with them, or what the timing will be, and what you want to save, what you want to clone, what pollen you'd want to save, which ones you want to put together, and what kind of preservation work that you might be doing, just putting a couple things together that you already have, or are you going to do a whole lot of new things? So I want to do it all. So I just work really hard on a couple lines, and then I make a whole lot of polyhybrids.
Yeah, brilliant answer. And I guess the question that comes to mind for me is, like the Athena, do you think there's an endpoint, or is it a forever changing and morphing sort of piece of art?
Exactly. Yeah. Forever changing, morphing piece of art. I don't want to manipulate that relationship. I don't know. There's something about that plant that she's just given me so much, and I'm just going to just watch and learn from her, and each year see what happens, and make sure to preserve things. I've lost some of the things that I might have thought that I wanted to continue, but I've also gained so many others. So I'm just open to where that goes. But as long as I still see her in there.
Sure. And out of the current crosses you're working on, I mean, you mentioned the Cherry Lime Dog earlier on. What are some of the ones you're really excited to delve more into?
That flavor right now too. Well, the thing is, it doesn't even have to just like. So I'm looking at just Cherry Lime Dog as multiple ways to dive into the same thing. So I took the Cherry Lime Dog, and I made my F2s from that. But then I was also like, out of those F2s, I'm like, I kind of want it to look a lot like the Black Dog structure too, and bring some of that back. So I put some of that back onto the the 2012 Black Dog clone to make the VC1. And then I made the F2s with those, and I'm making the F3s right now. So it's like, it's kind of going down a different line, although it's still, I did make my selection holding on to the flavor profile that I really liked, that a lot of the cherry lime pop, shines through from that, from Jackson, from Mean Gene Freeborn Selections. But it's like, it's a super great blend with the Black Dog. It just got that, it's got the right harmony of the blends of flavor, but it's a little more Black Dog in structure. So this is also a more uniform, dwarfy, and I also made a dark selection and a slightly lighter selection. So one that just turns purple super quick, and like right now it's like really, really dark, just with the first little like nugs coming up for the breeding project I'm working on right now with them. Frosted out like crazy, just at, they're not even a half a inch like wide yet, but just completely coated and dark. But they have the structure of the Black Dog, and so they're consistent, they're squatty. They won't need any caging, they need no effort. I don't water or feed or do anything, I just let them do their thing. So I kind of like breeding for plants that you don't have to do anything to, and that produce a tremendous amount for their biomass. They're not necessarily the monster plants that you need to cage and that, take up all this space. But the thing is, they're producing more flowers per the rest of the plant. And and if you have them next to each other, you're probably going to have a more productive square footage. So I do like thinking about those kinds of lines. And then with the Cherry Lime Dog F4s that I'm making right now, I'm kind of going with the more classic hybrid growth, where they're a taller one. The Cherry Lime Pop was tall, and it had a really nice mix with the Black Dog, where it was still like a medium tall plant, but it was well structured from the Black Dog, but not I had problems with the overstretching of the Lime Pop in this area, because the branches got too wet or wind and stuff. They had a tendency to break a little bit easier, and I really don't. I'm kind of an all natural style, and I don't want to have to do cages and things. Yeah. So that the Black Dog structure really worked great to keep those stems and branches really strong. And but the F3 generation is a nice, tall, fast growing. It's not all squatty, and that's nice for people too. And then it just has a just insane flavor profile. And so I did a pretty big selection last year, and it was so. I mean, it wasn't giant or whatever, but it was so hard to choose, because it was literally like, this is my favorite aroma I've ever smelled in my life. No, this one is. No, this one is. And like, and so the one I ended up like popping from, like, God damn, that the aroma from that is just like, yeah, it's from the gods for sure. And big respect to Jackson for his nose and his work.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean,
to Mean Gene.
Yeah. So it makes me wonder then, are there any other sort of modern genetics or modern clones that you would be interested in incorporating into the Black Dog line, just kind of seeing where it goes?
Dude, you could literally probably name every single one, and it's already happened. Like, go ahead. It's happening.
All right. Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah. Sorry, so I mean, like, well, and like hash lines too. Like the Banana Dog is been wonderful, and I mentioned smoking on some of that hash earlier too. That the Garden of Greece did, Kush Kirk and Amanda. They are just freaking hash artists and amazing regenerative farmers. Dragonfly Earth Medicine, pure farmers up in Oregon, just making. I honestly, like, their freezer. It's the best. The highest concentration of the best hash in the world. Like, it was just like, I went up with Simply Adam, and we're just like, yeah, they just took our breath away. Some of the best gourmet experiences of my life, with actually their puppy breath, which was the Mendo breath with an SFE Black Dog. And yeah, so I mean, there's two, SFE OG and Mendo breath on Black Dog, but oh my God, the quality of that hash is just unbelievable. It's so just great structure, great consistency too. You can just like snap it off, and like it just took a second to like just press it, and it just like the idea of rosin that quality of full melt would be so insane because it's just so beyond. You just touch it and it's already so beyond rosin. And then it holds a consistency too, where it's like amber. I can like break it even at room temperature, where like other stuff would just kind of get a little like, start to be a little more volatile, a little greasy, either cake or grease. And this just has this like jewel-like quality to it. And the puppy breath had that too. And it makes it really easy to catch too. And they get really high yields, and they were very resistant too, very mold resistant. But I love breeding for high ice water hash yields. I'm really interested in trichome morphology, and also, bud structure, and then also the terpene and cannabinoid production that is associated with trichomes that are easier to work with ice water hash that lead to higher yields. And then also thinking about like where the, getting different unique flavors and how you could do that with still getting a decent return on other varieties that might not be as good for catching in a mesh.
Yeah, what a sort of conscious effort with breeding to take it in that direction.
And then with CBD too, I really want to do that with CBD, and I've the last couple of years I have some pretty, good beginning successes towards that effort, and I'm excited for like the Holy Tonic selection, which was a Big Sur Holy Weed Cannatonic cross. That there's a 2-to-1 selection that has the right kind of trichomes. And then some of the different crosses with that, like black sapphire on that, which is double Black Dog Sapphire Scout Holy Crack, and then just straight Black Dog on that too. It's like some of these are they're gonna come out with the right trichomes. I also did some Banana OG Harlessu, but really the Cannatonic and the Holy Tonic crosses are look like they're going to work really. The selections that I made years ago of these, they're specific ones, and a really orangey, really beautiful, high trichome content variety of the Cannatonic. That's a 3-to-1 that the Holy Tonic was made from. They just more than most CBD varieties, they have the type of trichomes that could do it, and I've seen some good successes so far. So I'm really excited for some of the research projects that are happening this year with that, and seeing that come to fruition with some of the extractors and farmers.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, a question I've had for a little while now is, do you think that ultimately terroir is able to manifest itself more so in hash maybe than flour? Like, do you think it's more perceivably noticeable if you made a product kind of like what you described, that might stand itself out a little more than the flour, or do you think not necessarily? Like, they could both equally be very unique?
Yeah, they both could be very unique. I mean, certainly there's a concentration that happens with hash, and I think one thing I've definitely heard over and over again from hash artists and extractors is they fully have been blown away when they first like run some living soil based trichomes, like when they've just been running salt, or indoor or maybe less organically grown depths or stuff with dust and all the things. But I've seen it happen a bunch of times. Just like, oh my God, like what is the quality of this is just incredible, and it's hard for them to go back. So most extractors that I've worked with who've been turned on to that have been very they only want to source that type of material.
Yeah.
So I think that shows something about the terroir for sure.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, just to kind of stimulate a bit of discussion, it wasn't too long ago I was chatting with Burnside Collective, who were the guys who won the hash category of the Ego Clash, and they did it in salts, and they made this interesting comment where they were kind of like, we think that producing hash and concentrates specifically, it's more about like the watering techniques and like the humidities and stuff, more so than organic versus inorganic because you're just kind of getting the glandular heads. Do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think like
Sure. Absolutely. Environmental conditions, like never being stressed out, having the right like temperature and just the plant being happy all the time and it being the right genetic in the first place is it might be stand out even more than other things too. I think it first just starts off with the genetic. Like, is that genetic going to put off the flavor that's going to work out? Like, if it doesn't, then it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's not going to work. Next, though, I really think, just like not having an environment that has stress. I remember when like Simply Adam first like was washing some of our living soil grown coastal stuff, like I think there's something about the lack of stress in the environment because it never gets too hot or too dry or anything. And the trichomes could really just be what they wanted to be with never seeing any stress. So I think, someone putting a lot of effort towards environmental control and not using any shitty products, at least stuff that would be very, benign, I guess. Like, people that are going to be using pesticides or any kind of sprays are going to destroy hash. Obviously it's not going to taste good and it would be toxic and all that stuff. But, some mineral salts that are thoughtful in a good environment. I don't think it would be what it could be, but I do think it would be better than something else that was stressed out potentially. And certainly better than something that wasn't the right genetic in the first place. Yeah,
certainly. And so an issue I've been kind of tossing in my mind is, do you think there's any relationship between like the trichome density that you see on the plant and the quality of hash, or do you think they're not tied in together? And the reason I bring this up is because I think a lot of people look at like Mac or whatever and they're like, oh, it must make the best hash.
Yeah, necks. And like this is something I like to bring up when, like just in that the idea of trichome density, it's like, well, how do you even measure that? And I would like to establish like, better ways to measure that, because you can't just say there's this many trichomes. That's not telling you what you need to know. It's what size are the heads, what just you have to describe the necks. Like, are they all snaking around and making that illusion of the whole thing? And it's like Black Dog is one that's like both. It's got the long necks and it's got the heads. So it's got that, like, it can have that super frosted out look. But there's other varieties that might even be packing more trichomes, but they're not poking them out with the necks. Like they're just heads that kind of grow before the neck even, or then they grow and then the neck will kind of come after and they'll hook a bit. But it's like the plants that put that effort towards the head. But it's not just that too. It's what is the makeup inside that trichome? What are the terpenes and cannabinoids? And a lot of CBD varieties, like why I was talking about it, they don't yield that well. They have like high myrcene contents quite often, and different volatile terps that they just grease out really easy. You touch them and they grease out. Like, obviously you're going to lose so much if you're trying to separate trichome heads if they all just burst. So there's a lot of things to think about in the morphology and the chemical makeup beyond trichome density.
And do you think over time, as the quality of hash and concentrates in general improves, that we're going to see more and more people move away from flour, move towards concentrates? Or do you think it's just like whatever floats your boat?
Flour is never going to go anywhere, and it's like the basis for everything. And even if I want to smoke hash all day, I want to see where the flour it came from too, and enjoy that too, or roll a joint with the two together. And right now, like, actually, it's kind of funny in the California, like, legal market, in all of the markets, there's really like no end to the desire for really quality flour, especially after the outdoor season's been over for so long and depths are just hitting, and indoor is so rare in general, especially also in the legal market too, that people, I mean, if you got really good flowers, people go for the flowers. Like, it's still, you're going to make more on that too, as the farmers in general. It still gets the best price. But that's what's really nice about breeding for yield, that, let's say something, you're growing a variety that yields well in ice water hash, let's say yields average, but it's good enough to work, and you're growing that. But then you get genetics of another variety that yields 3 times as much as that decent yielding variety. You just grew 3 times as much in that same location with the same amount of resources and the same license and the same square footage. So that's huge difference. And so I want to breed towards things that help farmers do better.
Yeah, I mean, a great point. And on the topic of breeding, something which really stood out to me about your breeding, which I'd love to chat about, is that I've noticed, and I'm probably wrong, but I when it comes to mind, I've noticed that you do something really unique with your breeding that I've only ever seen Res Dog do, which is like explore these sort of back cross and then take it to the next filial generation, and then interweaving back crossing and filial breeding, whereas most breeders tend to stick to one or the other. What's your thoughts on that? And do you think that other people might be missing out on a little something by just back crossing or just filial breeding?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all something to explore, and I want to do both at the same time, because I get to see what comes out of that, and I'm just interested too in how to get to certain places faster. And sometimes I think BC back cross generation makes more sense. And yeah, I like that to also people are actually, to have people think about that too, and because I remember back cross, you'd see it. It was so often used as sibling pairing and stuff too, and it's just it didn't. Yeah, so just using the terminology, of course, that gets really difficult too, because which back cross is it on? So I mean, I actually do note it'll be the 2012 Black Dog selection, for that Cherry Lime Dog BC1 F2 number 3, so I know that, but but it could have been the BC, the same thing. What if I put it back on the Cherry Lime Pop or something? It would still be the same notation, and yeah, that kind of, I just have to write down all the things basically. Being well labeled is important. And then, yeah, I just really love to see, later on, I don't know what kind of research I can do too, already able to do a decent amount, and being able to see how genetically consistent something is, and being able to learn from what's the fastest way to achieve something in a generation of seeds. An interesting example that I really love, and we got these giant, beautiful glazed cherry plants in the yard, and these are from Green Source Gardens. And the first time we met Nick from Green Source Gardens, I was with Ryan of Humboldt Seed Organization, and we went over to their place in Jacksonville before they got their current farm, and we gave them a bunch of seeds, traded a bunch of seeds, hung out, had a great time, put my hands in some of the most beautiful soil I've ever seen, and they had this amazing little medical backyard grow that in the pictures looked like the most giant, amazing oasis you could imagine, and the most giant pinkleberry flowers, and just a total magic place. But with these seeds, the glazed cherries that Ryan Humboldt Seeds Organization gave them from Keith Sweat's work on the glazed cherries, which is Cherry OG, and it was a cookies cross that worked a little bit. That Nick ended up taking it to 5 generations out there, and in their farm in Oregon, and adapted to their spot and everything. And so that's an F5 from these seeds when we met 5 years ago, and then he'd also taken the Black Dog BC4 multiple generations too. So he had 2 very established inbred lines that he put together and made these F1s last year. And he gave me some of these, and they're just true F1s. You know, when we talk about a hybrid, like an F1 hybrid, like normally it should be coming from 2 established lines. And, you know, he just freaking did the work, spent 5 years, you know, and it's just cool, like a gift from when you first meet, and then that churning into this amazing thing. But the consistency between these plants and the giant leaves and the vigor and everything, it's what you'd expect in a F1 generation. A lot of other plants, it's kind of how it's done. A lot of times you'll take something to a, you know, F9 before and before you start putting it together for an F1.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's a really interesting point you bring up there, because a lot of people talk about how if you took 2 really inbred lines and crossed them together, that would be like what you might think of as like a true F1, because it's like, you know, 2 really diverse things.
Yep.
Do you find that you like that sort of pairing over the more like F1 cross F1 making a new F1?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I like everything. I super like these F1s of the glazed cherries. They're just insanely nice. They kind of, yeah, they're just the standard of what you'd want from a F1 generation. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of other things I'd probably classify as a polyhybrid instead of a F1.
Yeah, sure.
Because you know, I don't have a pedigree on the other thing, and also when you're just like, which I do all the time too, crossing in a, you know, a well-established cut or whatever, you don't know if that was a bag seed, if somebody did any work on that, or if it was just a found thing or not, or how crazy the generation was before it. You don't actually know, because a lot of these things we don't have any kind of pedigree on it. That's something I kind of look forward to. I really like dogs, and I like the idea of like kind of the breed standard and different things being built by breeders, and so we have this information that we can work with and actually know all the, you know, like when I look at a plant, I love that I get to like think about their grandmother and their great grandfather and all of that stuff, you know, like it. And because I label well and I take pictures of everything, like I can really go back and just know all these things. It just brings me a lot of joy to have that family history.
Yeah, and it sounds like a consistent theme I'm picking up that is important to you is like good documentation, good record keeping. Do you think that this is something which unfortunately might not be done well enough by others at the moment?
Well, I mean, I can always do it better too, but you know, no, actually, I mean, I go crazy if I do it wrong. Like, but yeah, I don't know, like it all works, but yeah, it's tough too when I go to these amazing farms and they've mixed everything up and it's just like, no, like, and then I try to be all positive and stuff because everything looks great, but I'm like dying inside. And like, yeah, no, everyone label well, please. It makes breeders happy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like this idea is something even both myself and obviously you as well are hoping to promote, because there have been times when, you know, maybe I've messaged a breeder and I was like, hey man, just so you know, like you should put the female first and the male second in when you're listing the parent stuff. And sometimes people get really defensive and it's like, I'm not trying to have a go at you, man. It's just, you know, the convention, you know, like it just helps if we all follow it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like female first. It makes sense to me.
So, I mean, the next question I wanted to ask was, I'm sure it has happened, but just to really get the verdict on it, have you ever done a certain cross, like maybe you're taking a certain thing to the F2 or the BX3 and you do it and you're like, oh man, I think I might need to go back and redo that a bit different. Like I didn't quite get what I was looking for. Does that happen, or do you find you instead maybe just find something you weren't expecting, but it's equally cool and you're like, oh, okay, looks like we're just going to go down this path?
So much unexpected always happens in life. You know, it's like and the thing is also because you know the generations, you do know what to expect too. But I do find that quite often the plants fulfill the expectations because I know their history, but often I find that the things I think about first are like, oh, that's the one. So often it's a surprise at the end. So often it's like, yeah. So you really don't know anything till you go through the full process as far as selection goes.
Sure. And so a question our viewers always love to hear our guests answer is, are there any particular traits that you think are representative of a good male? Like, I remember just the common one is like Subcool always used to say, you want a male that, is not super quick flowering, but also not the last one in the pack. So he always kind of pitched it as though, towards the later end of things. Are there any traits you think represent a good male, or do you think it's just variable and it depends what you're looking for out of the male?
Yeah, all of them. That's the thing. It's like, what are you going for? I like to work backwards. So like, and I like to have a lot of males and be able to really choose what's going to make sense for something. But what I'm looking for is going to be completely based off of kind of the end goal. So it's not a blanket question, like, and how do you do that search? Are you making a high CBD, you're just making sure that it's a CBD rich, then you're going to do analytics for your male search. Are you looking for resistance? Then you might want to put them in a place that's, going to be a place that would bring out molds and disease and see the strongest ones. You might be it's all about smell, and just the stem rub is really going to be what it's about. You might really care about flower structure. So you might really look at like how does that male flower look too? There's a lot of things to look at, general health, vigor. But normally you're putting all of these factors together a bit. And then paying attention to the things that you have already observed from the past. If you know a certain stem rub is associated with an end flower, like that's something you gain by just paying attention to plants for like 20 years. And it cracked me up it was one of the Regen conferences, and Mean Gene was talking on one of the panels, and somebody had asked that question, and he just started talking about all this stuff, and he was describing how, if you smell pickles on that early stem rub, that ends up being like your gassy ones, and just all this like nuanced details of stuff that he'd been observing for like 2 decades. And like at the end of it, it was just like the dude was like looking for like, a short answer, like, what's a good male or whatever. And, it was like the answer was like, well, you just pay attention for 20 years and then you start to get the beginning of an idea or something. It was kind of, so yeah, there's just a ton of things to put all together and what your selection is going to be for what you're making. But, I want them to be resistant. I want them to be healthy. I don't want people to struggle, I don't want them to have to use things to deal with mildews and molt. And so like, if I can have that be part of the male selection, that's super great. But I'm not going to do that at the detriment of like the quality and smell too. Like, it's like, still, if like there's nothing coming off that stem rub, doesn't matter how resistant it is necessarily. Well, hopefully there's a really good smelling one next to it that's resistant too.
Yeah, certainly.
Oh, actually, for the males too, you brought up the like, oh, you just want the ones that are the right timing. I really think that all the different timings are useful. Like I put some of them just to play with it, see what happens. I put some of like the most early males that came out of a Orange Valley dog, Cherry Lime dog cross onto some auto OGs, and see what that does next year. I'll observe that, and there's multiple ways I can go with that. I could make more autos with it, or I could just have an earlier flowering generation, make selections off that, see a little mix of things. But like, what do you want to do, and what's your environment? Like, maybe you only do want to be using those super early flowering males, but like if you have a really nice full season, maybe you super want that full stacking all August. You don't want it to be, wasting, and flowering early instead of continuing to grow and stack. So it's really dependent on your end goal and where you are. if you're closer to the coast, shit, use those earlier males maybe. But I think you should use them all too. The other thing is I like staggering of harvest times and being able to work with farmers to create kind of a genetic plan to do that. So like if you want to be harvesting from, mid-late September until November, then you get to do each week, we'll take down this and then we'll take down that and then we'll take down this. When it's all, hey, it's October 20th and it's all ready at the same time, drying space is difficult. And then quality goes down if you're trying to like pack everything in, you're doing things quickly and all of that, and you might not be able to save it all. And so I think, really staggering flowering times makes a lot of sense. So making that notation, which I like to do, like I note those first flowering males and those later ones, and note that information, so I can have an idea of the next generation. And once I see that working, then I can recommend that to a farmer for, hey, I know that this variety is going to be done on the first week of October. This one will be the second. This one will be the third. And that helps stagger that kind of harvest. And what I really like is for ice water hash varieties. And some of the varieties like the banana crosses, the Holy Nana Crack, Banana Dog, and different things are really Voltron, which is Athena, Holy Crack times Sapphire Scout Black Dog. Those are incredibly resistant and later season. It's like the end of October. And they look so mature and good. And actually, you could see the Voltron on the calendar. I think you might have got at the Emerald Cup.
Oh yeah.
On the October shot is a Candid Kush photo, and from Highwater Farms, and it was dry farmed, and just the maturity of the crystals and the size. And this is a flower that really, literally nothing was done. Like it was cover crop, tilled, correctly planted, and then let the winds just rip through it, and it was let to dry and to get ravaged by the environment, and then it became hardy and strong and grew like flowers that would blow away any of the most cracked out indoor you'll see. Like it's so freaking just frosted out, dense and beautiful. And but so like that Holy Nana Crack though is a great example for the really high resistant, and it does a thing with the flower structure where it separates each different nug just enough that you don't have air, water being trapped. That each one is just segmented enough that it has a good open air, and it's already incredibly resistant to botrytis. And it also doesn't grow in a shape that would trap that moisture. And then that also lends better to ice water hash because each one of these nugs has more surface area, and they have the perfect trichomes for it too, just like large size heads and heads first, and not a whole lot of necks. Like all that energy is going to really nice heads. And you can harvest those in November when it's like cold and not have any worry of any mold. And it's a really nice time to make fresh frozen after everything else is harvested.
Yeah, what an awesome answer there. And something you brought up I'd love to talk a little more about is the role autos might play in the future. Do you see them potentially filling a niche in terms of maybe little windows where other cultivars aren't quite suitable? Or do you think it's kind of a different domain to what the farms will be working with long term in a certain respect?
Yeah, it's been slow at first, but oh my God, it's game on with autos right now. Holy shit, they're fucking nice. They're freaking nice, dude. I have this beautiful garden over here that, friend Ryan had worked on with the Humboldt Seed Organization, and these auto OGs, fastest growing plants I've ever seen in my life, like just stunning. And I just direct sowed them. They're feminized. They're, it was a project we did locally, and they are just phenomenal. Like I have, they're, some of them are above my shoulder, almost as tall as me, just filling out everywhere. Freaking smell amazing. There's bubble gum, there's fruit, there's gas, and incredibly sturdy stalks, and incredible trichome production. Like, I don't, it's like, it's not like how autos work. The work's been done, and there's a lot that can be done. And actually looking at just the stalks, I'm like, damn, these would be amazing fiber plants too. Like if you're able to both harvest the flowers and the fibers, because with autos, you have so many close to each other that you're growing so many stalks, that I could see like there being kind of a cool combo of that. Cause man, they're thick and stocky. A thing about autos that's really interesting too is, just how reactive they are to their environment. They are metabolic machines. They grow incredibly fast, or they don't at all. The conditions really mean a lot. It's really easy to have them stunt out and be really small at different times of year. Like they don't want to be like cold or too wet. And they definitely don't want to be eaten by banana slugs all winter long like they were here. But the ones that I just direct sowed at the perfect time for to get them to be able to veg in this and flower during the mid of the summer it's just game on. And the ones that went right in the ground grew incredibly fast, and I've never watered them. And I think they really like that. They don't want to be too wet. There's places where they would just dry out and die, but this isn't one of them. They can tap in, and the soil biology is rich, and so it holds onto moisture pretty well. And I'm in an area that's relatively it's green, and it gets the marine moisture. It hasn't rained, but they really enjoy just being able to tap in. They don't want much water, but they do want to be able to eat. So I did amend them ahead of time, like some fish bone and bokashi and kelp and some trace mineral, and that's all. And yeah, they just go. The ones in pots are definitely considerably smaller, and any ones that were left in the 4-inch pots, like I planted a bunch, and then I decided to fill in some of the gaps a little bit more with some plants that were that were in some 4-inch pots a week later, and about half the size just in that time. And that's how much like you lose every day that they don't get to just go. So they're metabolic machines. So when you dial it in, and what works in your place, like super powerful what you can do with autos. And as we continue to like just cross in awesome flavors, awesome attributes, like, autos will be doing all the different things that we'd want them to be doing, whether it's for good hash, whether it's for CBD, whether it's just insanely good flowers. But I also think, fiber and all kinds of other aspects are very viable with autos. And I'm just stunned with what I've seen with these ones this year. It's a whole nother world the last 2 years in autos.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the guys at Mephisto certainly really done a lot of work in, I think, a lot of consumers' eyes. They made people realize you can do good stuff, and now people recognize across the board there's good autos. My question
has been doing a lot of great work too.
Yeah, certainly.
My friends there for that work.
Well, I was just going to ask, can we expect a black dog auto down the line? And if so, would you want to just cross it to a ruderalis and keep it black dog, or more like cross it to like an OG auto and have like a hybridy sort of thing?
Yes, that's being figured out. but man, these OG autos are looking so nice with it too. I mean, I'll be making the cross regardless, but we'll see what works out from there. And there's definitely potential for that. And I think it would actually lend really well to that, because it's already got a very consistent quality that works well for lots grown smaller together, and high production. So I think that's highly likely. That would be a couple years probably, but highly likely.
Yeah, sure. And the other thing you brought up, which was really interesting to me, was, and you've said it a few times, is dry farming. And the reason why I'm interested in this is because I feel like as the concept takes off more, there's more of a demand for seed, because obviously clones don't do very well in a dry farming situation. Do you think that is a possible situation where outdoor growers move away from clones almost entirely and are just using seed because of the benefits, maybe in a dry farming context, maybe in general, but do you think that they're going to move more consistently to seed and a little away from clone?
I mean, the market's still going to demand certain clone varieties, that's always going to be the case. And there's certain dry farm areas that can still grow clone cultivars pretty well. High water farms being one of them, but in general, they just grow all seed. Actually, these dry farms, and they super prefer that the way they tap in and the expression. And there are a few dry farms growing some of these autos right now, so we'll get to see exactly how they're expressing there. I think that absolutely makes it like the dream of just direct sowing feminized autos and doing nothing on dry farms. Yeah, I think that's something that is very much probably, happening on small scales this year and will just grow, I'm sure, next year and the following years.
Yeah, awesome. So something I wanted to chat with you, because we recently had him on the show, was the legend himself, Irizen. And I know that you've been working with some varieties and you guys are friends and have got some sort of work together. Would you be able to give us a little bit of an insight into what you're working with and what your hopes are to do with that?
Yeah, man, it just like made my heart sing to hear that shout out from him. I just respect his work so much and consider him a great friend, and such a great friend to cannabis, and just honestly, like the world, really respect the work that he's doing tremendously. I think he's one of the most important people in cannabis, and I love him for it. To be able to work with these things from all these different places where he's done the documentation, not just of the plant, which he does an amazing job of, but of the terroir and the culture and the factors that led up to that, that kind of varietal existing. It's just amazing. So all these different parts of the world, they get to read about, the culture, what they were producing, and are these hash multi-generational hash communities? Are they specific farmers? Are they like totally true primordial land race? And one of the most amazing things that's to have in the garden right now is seed plants from Low Lab Valley in Kashmir, and Deepak Irazan had brought these. He was documenting the seeds out there, and these plants growing in the forests of Kashmir in the Low Lab Valley, and he paid attention to the pollination and the males coming out, and then came back out to collect seeds and got just all these amazing pictures of them. And these are true wolves, basically. Like if you put it in context of dogs, like we have all our different hybrids and stuff, and these are wolves in their environment. And it's kind of like cannabis for the land before time, because it's not affected by any other feral varieties or cross-pollination. It's not affected by human encroachment. It's not affected by light pollution. They just are what they are. And what's amazing about that is cannabis, man. Like these are still straight cannabis plants, and they're incredibly interesting and unique. And I have a time lapse on them right now, and I like watching them at night, and they just super tuck their leaves down real tight to the stem, and then right at like 4 a.m. I mean, all the plants do this a little bit, but these do it really extreme. They just start to like wake up, and it's a total like morning yoga, just like, and they already know where the sun's going to be like an hour before it gets there, just getting into position. And it's a beautiful dance to watch. And just right now I'm getting to see the first male, starting to show, and the first females, and there's even a pink pistil coming off of one of them. Amazing, carotene in production and anthocyanin in production, and they're just really interesting plants, man. They're ready to protect themselves, from the environment. The thing that I find really interesting about them was their seeds too, which are incredibly small. They're probably about 1/10 of the size of a normal, like domesticated variety, like black dog or something. And they also take a while to germinate, and not a whole lot of them germinate like quickly. And a lot of this, I think, has to do with, what what works for survivability out there, because nobody's being like, nobody's saving the seeds and then starting them like you would in a variety that would start to be domesticated, where somebody's like, oh, I like this flower, and you're smelling it, and then you keep it, and then you start the seeds from that. That's starting that work towards domestication pretty quickly. But these, because nobody's doing that, they're wind dispersed more. They're like small. They're ready to like fall out of the plant easy, and so they're kind of sharp, lemon-shaped, teeny little seeds. And then they don't want to germinate before it's the right time of year. Otherwise, they would just germinate and get killed by like snow or the wrong climate. So they're just they're well adapted. Like where a domesticated variety, you add water to it, and it's like, oh, it germed in like within 24 hours, and that's something to celebrate. But that would be death in the wild environment. It's like if all those seeds germinated the second they hit the ground and water hit them, then they'd all just die that winter. So it's just interesting, those quick changes that happen, and not just the plant, but just right in the beginning with seed morphology and seed behavior. So that was really interesting just to learn from them. And the way they germinate is so slow. Like it's like they don't just shoot out the radical. It's like this slow goo of white radical that's kind of just over the course of days starts to come out. And then they grow all small and little. But when they go, then they start to like reach a bit, and they have like these amazing branches that kind of swing down low and come up, and nice narrow leaves. And I'm sure they're going to have a decent amount of color, and well, some will. But yeah, you see purple and green varieties. You see full-on trichome production. You see CBD and THC production. So it's just kind of interesting, even from the early days, cannabis had all this potential stored in it. And that's kind of what I'm seeing in this too, that it was all there. But what we see with our all the varieties and all the things that we have now is how that relationship has evolved, that mutualistic relationship that we entered into with cannabis. Like that's what's different, between a true primordial and these domesticated varieties is our relationship with them. But I don't know. It makes me think though that maybe low lab was like these early varieties still could produce all of these incredibly useful things for humans and our medicine. And I think about dogs and how, like wolves are adapted for a location, for a forest, for that place. They're they're ready to survive, but they have no relationship with humans. The humans are something to be avoided and everything. But a dog is like everything is they're engaged with how do we interact and bring benefit to a human. They're always studying our face. They're always wanting to know what we're feeling. They're wanting to know what the next job that they can do. And that was like this mutualistic relationship that got entered into a long time ago. And that became this evolutionary shift between a wolf and a dog. And all of a sudden now, like this wild animal will watch our livestock. Like it won't eat them. It will guard them and protect them for us. I mean, that's a wild jump for an animal to do. They'll go to war for us. They will watch our children. They will, allow us to grow crops on our land without pigs like rooting it up. They will hunt for us. They'll, in the case of the Saluki in Egypt, like 3,000 years ago, they'll chase a rabbit down and grab it and bring it back to you, like at 45 miles an hour. They're highly specialized bred animals that quickly adapt to whatever we want. And like human envisions something and creates a breeding program and makes selections just so quickly that stuff happens. And it doesn't happen like that with other species. And I think the difference is that there was a moment of mutualism and an evolutionary strategy for that between humans and cannabis and humans and dogs. It's super similar. And I think that's why they're so similar in how we look at breeding with them too. But yeah, the low lab gets to teach me a lot about what was and what is.
Yeah, what a phenomenal answer. I mean, you actually answered the next question I was going to ask, which was, why do we see so many breeders also breed dogs? But there you go. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Well, I did the same thing too. I had a dog envision in my mind, and I went like crazy for years and bred like the father, and had the grandmother and mom, and like, yeah, all the generations. And I did it. I made the exact dog in my mind, and it was so incredible. But they all passed away now, and they're in the living soil here. And actually, shit, that brings me to another story involving Erazin. So I had got the Mazari Sharif seeds from him. He had the Mazari, which were they were labeled wild. I believe they have domestic feral influence because of how nice they are, and also like the way the seeds are. But they, God, just the biggest, the most amazing fan leaves. Like you'd have like a plant that was like 2 feet tall that had a fan leaf that was like 16 inches like long or something. It was crazy. And so these were really beautiful plants to like have growing in the garden. And our dog Ashley last year had developed a cancer in her jaw that just grew a big cancerous tumor right in front of her face. It was really tough, but she was fine for so long. We live in a beautiful place, took her to the beach every day, fed her fried chicken, and made every day, great until it was time.
Yeah. Awesome.
But so when she passed, though, we dug a grave, and right next to her mom and dad, and her dad has a beautiful tree that's growing above her, and we laid her in the ground and inoculated her with good beneficial fungus and compost and lots of worms and stropharia and oyster mushrooms and all that kind of stuff, shiitakes, and had her adorned with things ready to return her to the living soil. But then she liked to eat cannabis, and she was actually particularly good at identifying. She liked full spectrum cannabinoids too, so she'd get those like type 2s almost always. She's like, I like a little CBD with my THC, and it was just anyway. So we grabbed some of the like last leaves that she was munching on, and then I'm looking at these giant Mazar leaves, and I'm just like, oh, I gotta add that to it. And so there's a bouquet of flowers and cannabis leaves that were adorned and laid on top of her grave. And this time of year, her father's tree had all these white, beautiful flowers blossom on them. And they were in the tail end of the blossoming and ready for the petals to fall. And I shook the tree, and all of these petals started raining down gently and littered the grave in a very beautiful, aesthetic way. With this nice bouquet on top of it. And I had taken a picture of this before we buried her and had a fire and, drank some tequila and cried. And when I was talking to Deepak, Razin next, he had, I told him this story, and, I let him know that there was a Mazar leaf on her grave. And he's like, do you know what Mazar means? I was like, no. He's like, Mazar means grave. Mazar-e-Sharif is grave of the saint. And I'm like, Ashley was a saint. So I had already actually pollinated a Mazar with a black dog BC6. And so I put that on top of her grave to grow the seeds. And so this year I'm growing some of the St. Ashley's Mazar.
Wow, what a beautiful story. That's incredibly touching. I It makes me wonder, do you think that the process of incorporating, whether it be ashes, whether it maybe be, if it's a dog, you might be able to use the full thing. Do you think that this is something which people could benefit from incorporating more? Because I remember I mentioned it to Josh and Kelly of Dragonfly, and I think she said her mum she's got her mother's ashes in one of her greenhouses, and I was like, man, that's what I want for me.
Well, I mean, from a science, it's impossible to say what's what, or because there's so many variables. But one thing I know that plants respond to love, and if you put that into it, it means something. And I mean, the soil beneath that plant, the soil that returned her body is absolutely alive, and all of the organisms returning her are doing a process of love, of returning that organic matter back to life, back to rejuvenation. So yeah, I think that process is powerful.
Certainly. And do you have any hopes for the long-term trajectory of the strain and the cross, or is it just like a gift?
Holy crap, it's one of the most beautiful plants I've ever seen in my life. It's so pretty. So we'll see. But oh my God, the leaves are just so dark and big and reptilian. It's so healthy, and I just love it. It's just, the plant just screams like love. And so I have one that like started early. I had a whole bunch of slugs eat my first rounds. This is a very intense area for slugs, but I started a whole nother round of them too. So I have a really good group right now to make the next generation with. But there's a couple people growing some right now too. I think actually Indigo Farms up in Oregon just let me know that St. Ashley's Mazar made it into their research plot that will so I can't wait to go see her up there. And there's a couple other special friends I'll be able to probably see what she does in those places. And we'll see what the future holds. But man, it's just so pretty right off the bat.
Yeah, what a like a powerful and beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. A question which kind of come to mind when I was thinking of that, and especially when you were talking about the Mazar and some of the Indian cultivars, is, do you think that the expression you're getting from them, this really nice natural expression you spoke about where, they're almost given the sun salutations, do you think that might have been lost almost if you tried to take those same seeds and like grow them in a sort of a salt and cocoa environment? Like, do you think that there's a synergy from that you're trying to grow them naturally in the way they were originally conceived?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think they'd be doing the sun salutations if there wasn't the sun going up and down. And, it's like, and they wouldn't be choosing the part of the sky to start aiming towards before, because it's always the same freaking thing right above them making that buzzing noise. I don't know. I think like, how do you feel like when you're in a desk with a bunch of like noisy fluorescence in school, like versus like being out in the woods, like on a botany tour or something, it's like, I think, of course it's different. It's a completely different experience for them. I mean, their environment, everyone's environment affects everything, and they're very alive and conscious, and are constantly adapting, thinking, doing things, and feeling things. And they feel our love, they feel our connection, they feel the environment that they're in, and it's definitely way different in an indoor environment than a natural one. But I mean, a natural one could be really rough on them too. They want to be drying out and dying in the sun, or in a cold, harsh winter, or neglected in a greenhouse and forgot. It's like they still got to have their soils, their roots in a nice soil, or some kind of nutrition.
Yeah, of course.
They're very efficient too. That's the thing too. That's neat with the low lab too. Like you could tell that they would just make do with whatever they have. They don't need this like giant amount of resources put out in front of them. Like they could grow in a crack.
Yeah, I love that. The hardy. So a topic which comes up somewhat frequently on the show is the discussion around the idea of, do you think seeds created in an organic or even better regenerative farming practice produce better seeds, like maybe hardy, things like that? Do you think that plays into it, or would you be happy to buy seeds that were produced in salts compared to ones that were produced in soil?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely a difference. I mean, obviously I have my feelings about, the intention and love that we put into things. And so getting, seeds from some of my favorite regenerative farmers who have been doing this work and been breeding and been putting love into their land and into their projects, means a hell of a lot more to me than anything else. And I don't really have like any extra space for anyone else's stuff but my own. So like, it's just like the really cool, close people I really love what they're doing that make it in. So, but there's a lot of ways to do things, and there's really a lot of like, let's say you're making some feminized autos, like maybe that's the most efficient way to do them. I'm not going to say it's not. And if you're doing the correct genetic work and you're doing the quality standards ahead of time, then there's cases where those seeds might be desirable, useful for me. But the thing is, if I'm going to do something like that, there has to be the work behind it, and I have to know that like it is what it is, and it has to be like super useful. And yeah, so like, and I think that's going to be the, a lot of large scale farming and stuff, like, they're going to need very consistent seeds produced, and the way that's done isn't always going to be, a farmer pouring all their love and heart into their living soil plant. Sometimes it's just going to be straight production, and if the genetic work is done correctly, then then those are going to be useful seeds.
Yeah, for sure. So, good point to bring it up, I think. How did you initially get into the regenerative farming movement? Was it just like a natural progression, or did you meet someone and they really kind of changed your trajectory, so to speak? How did that happen?
It was being here during the time when there's a lot of indoor growing, which was like, it's not regenerative at all, but it was mostly like kind of college age kids growing indoor, the Arcata area and just Humboldt in general. And there was a lot of outdoor growing too, but there was, the high prices of purple and then Bubba and then OG drove this incredible insanity of what was possible economically, which ended up being very disastrous environmentally. So like all of a sudden, like, hey, it makes sense to freaking make some giant underground, several hundred light grow run by a diesel generator that you literally truck tankers out and fill next to a sensitive watershed. And that was happening a lot. And it was just like, well, this is insane. And this is all based off of prohibition. This is like, they have to hide, and we're destroying like our environment because of these incredibly high prices that shouldn't exist in a real, economic reality that's not messed up by the government's war on drugs. It just destroyed, it makes inefficiencies, it creates cancers, it creates environmental issues when things like that happen. And at this time too, a lot of the indoor growers that were more in town, that were, college age, started going out to the hills, and they were taking what they had indoor, where they were making good money on these, varieties grown inside. And actually, more varieties went back then too, but then, OG started to take over harder and harder. Of course, Bubba always got good prices, but there was a lot of great varieties that still did pretty good. But it was the beginning one, was that purple, when LA was just crazy about purple. It just drove this huge change in the economics of the whole thing. And so when all these growers started going out with indoor tactics too, and even how they're growing their outdoor flowers in depths and stuff, where they're like going to the hydro store and buying all these expensive things that only really make sense in small grows inside, and bring it like large scale, and just like, wow, you're spending so much money and you're actually fucking shit up. Instead of, cultivating the soil, you're like bringing a bunch of, engineered soil from freaking really far away and bringing it up into the mountains, and like, all this stuff like mined in Canada and sent down, and then bringing all this perlite and bringing it out to these sensitive areas, and then using pesticides and all of that. And it was just like, dude, this is not working. This isn't how it should be. And it's totally out of balance. And the thing is, a lot of like good people are doing this too, because it's just like, what do you know? You know what you know from the grow shop. You just take what you're doing small and you apply it larger. So it's like it's not like anyone's like out there evil. Oh, I'm gonna fuck up the environment and do this. They're just trying to grow some good weed in the way that they know. Some people gave no fucks and like, we're total assholes about it, but not saying not the case, but some people just were ignorant to it, and just were trying to do their thing. So I just saw this moment where, there's a lot of education that needed to happen and change in the way people did things. And what I loved about it is it made shit cheaper. And so like going to like a grow where, they were just growing with salts and, using Avid and Maxi and whatever extra crazy salt stuff, whether it's Bushmaster or fucking whatever insanity. And, and not really getting the best results, really. It's like, you're probably not going to, might look kind of cool, but it's probably not tasting that great. You probably have some disease issues, all that stuff. And so there are certain farms where it's like, well, how about we build a whole bunch of biodynamic compost right here, or we just cover crop, we mulch that in, or we just do simple things, amending with, fish and kelp and bokashi and trace minerals. And then there's one farm too where like the neighbors were cattle ranchers too, and they had a bunch of equipment, so they could just go and clean out their cattle bins or their pens, and that was benefiting them. And then we had this like nice resource to work with, and I'd utilize all kinds of other stuff on the property to compost that in, and then they put that on, and then saw the best year that they'd ever seen, and had to use I think they said 1/9 of the water that they were using before, and didn't have to buy anything, and had by far the best year that they ever saw. So it's like, when somebody all of a sudden sees that, they're like, wait, I was spending a bunch of money, fucking shit up, like not doing the right things for the watershed or the end patients. And it's like, all I have to do is just like do a few things, thinking about the soil, plant, do nothing besides pull tarps or whatever they're doing. and I get better results for literally like no money spent. Like, so yeah, I just saw that as something, hey, I think these ideas can spread. And they did, and I loved it when, like more, maybe when a redneck is spreading this idea, or a hippie spreading this idea, or, an environmentalist or a law officer or what, all of a sudden, like, I ended up on a panel with like the ag commissioner and the sheriff, and it was kind of funny. It was like ag commissioner, sheriff, Biovortex. And it's like, what the fuck is a Biovortex? Like, we know what an ag commissioner is and the sheriff is. This guy's a Biovortex. And it was, super fun being on the panel and having this debate. They're not debate, like they fully were, just like, hell yeah, with all this stuff. Like that's the kind of stuff we want to see, and as things become more open. It was kind of funny too, like correcting the ag commissioner on the pronunciation of myclobutanol, because he kept saying myclobutanol. And it's like, dude, it's like one of the most important like issues with like cannabis in California at that time, because it was that's like the active ingredient in Eagle 20 and like other things that are designed for systemic powdery mildew control. And they're kind of nasty poisons that concentrate really well in concentrate. So if you're making hash, you're making BHO or any of those kinds of concentrates, the myclobutanol concentrates would be very high, and they kind of would come out with the THC. That it was hard to separate it from that. And what was actually kind of cool about that was all of a sudden everyone started failing that used that, like all these different extractors just started seeing fails everywhere. And the thing is, it's so systemic that someone might not even had to use it. They got clones from someone who had used it, and you might not see noticeable levels in the flower, but once you get the concentrate, you're actually at a fail level, and that was a huge economic driver for people to clean up their act, having those standards in testing and seeing what was coming out in concentrates and just how pervasive certain things were. So yeah, I mean, sometimes, like there's a lot of like shitty things that end up working out the way it needs to, like end up bringing more information or awareness to things,
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, you raise an interesting point there. Something I've heard a lot recently is this idea, it's just anecdotal, but I mean, I think it might resonate with you, is someone said to me, you don't really see bud with PM these days. You just see a lot of concentrates. And I was like, yeah, that's true, isn't it? Like PM's just it's just gone. Like, as in, obviously it's all just getting turned to concentrates. And so, yeah, it speaks to the point you mentioned. And just to build on that, what do you think is kind of the next step or the direction in which big ag is going to go? Do you think it's still this existential kind of threat to the people in the industry like what we initially thought? Or do you think there's going to be more of an even playing field, kind of like what we see in Canada, where the big firms are just really actually failing quite miserably?
Yeah, I don't think like I know of any of the local or regen farms that we're planning on going into the large scale phytochemical like business or into large scale fiber production and stuff too. It's like these are people still want craft flowers, and I kind of think that the more educated the public is, the more that they're going to want stuff like that. And I don't really think the large companies are going to be able to really take the place of that. But they, of course, like as far as production for medicines, for biomass, for all of that, it's a big ag world. But there's ways to adapt to that, and hopefully can get these ideas of how they can save money in the way that they are growing, and not just have like it be all these salts, pesticides, and all this plastic. That's a big issue right now too, is all these hemp fields in Oregon all over is just the use of all the plastic mulching, and then all the drip lines, and just so much resources to grow plant. And that's one thing is people are just going to have to do it really cheap and with less resources, and like all that stuff takes a lot of labor, and you have to buy it and all that stuff. And so I'm just hopeful that those economic drivers will help the ecological outcomes of farming practices on large scale when it comes to cannabis. Because I mean, just think about that cost of like running drip lines to everything, of putting that mulch out, or the plastic, running all the plastic all the time, buying all of those things. And then like all of that shit just goes in the dump, and it's like killing the soil. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's insane.
Yeah.
But really, like, when I'm looking at these autos in the garden that were germinated and growing, I haven't watered or done anything. It's like, to me, that's the future of big ag. Like, just the do nothing approach. And it's just like, and really it's actually the breeding and the genetics, and like, getting quality stuff, sovereign fields, and, done a great job, like producing seeds with the right quality for those large scale, applications, and having the feminized with it, which is like kind of interesting because I really like all natural and regular breeding and but having feminized seeds is super useful for certain things. It's also useful for selfing and understanding different things about plants and doing other things, but being able to direct sow, I mean, fuck, that's a big deal for less resources. If you have to pot every plant and veg it and then go it out and plant it, and every step that you can take out work or resource being used and still get a nice production, I think is the way to go. And in general, that's always going to be a more environmental way, because ecological is economical.
Sure. And what are your thoughts on genetic modification of cannabis? Because our buddies Chimera and Sam Skunkman over at Molecular Farms are certainly doing it. Do you feel like that's a bit of a step too far, or do you feel like there might be value in that?
Oh, I think there's value in everything. I just want. I'm not a. Yeah. I want to learn everything, and if something makes sense, then yeah. I'm not like a. I can't just say, fuck. I mean, you can just pull out like one thing and then lose an expression that you didn't want. Like, that's great. Like, that could be super useful. What I'm afraid of, actually, more than genetically modifying, and how you want to define that can be different. Like, are you talking about a CRISPR, I mean, really, actually, breeding is genetically modifying. Like, what I'm doing is genetically modifying it through the work that we're doing as a human. I might not be taking a segment of DNA and pulling it out or putting something else in. I think there's a lot of use in pulling out something that might give an undesirable expression, and why not see what we can do with that? I don't see why not. But I do have a fear that with patents, once you genetically modify something, then that's like a really easy place to be like, I own this or something. And so making sure that we keep potential free with this plant, medical and breeding potential for everyone to be able to work with it in any way that we want. So yeah, my fear is more the legal repercussions of people trying to own different things through genetically modified work than the actual process, because I'm super interested to see what we can do. If you can just pull out a little segment, not a PM, like, I don't know, why not? Okay, let's do it.
Hell yeah. So
I way prefer doing it through natural selection and just observation and working with the plant that way. I feel more I don't know, that resonates with me better, but I'm not against anything really, unless it hurts the environment or it hurts people's human rights.
Yeah, good rules to live by. Just to loop back to a topic before, because we commonly get asked this by our listeners. Let's say that you totally in line with everything you've said and everything you believe, but unfortunately, maybe you live in the city, maybe in an apartment or something like that, and the goal is to get to a farm one day, but just unfortunately that's not quite now. Do you think that there is, like, you can still do your best to, do living organic soil indoors, and like, is there a compromise that you feel like, you're doing the best for the situation you've got, or do you feel like unless you're outdoors, it is really quite hard to try to, get to the standard that you're at?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the personal little indoor is just such a oasis and a beautiful thing to celebrate. I'm not against that at all. I don't like the insane large scale use of lights, like especially in areas where the sun's just beating there. It's just like an insane use of resources and energy. But like, man, to have a relationship with cannabis in your own apartment, or if you're in a place where the growing conditions aren't that good, or just to be able to have cannabis year round, like, fuck yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And I think it is super doable with living soil type production. And I think people will have a really good time, doing those multiple years of cultivating soils. People are proud about how many runs they've done in the same living soil bed. And, they show how they keep getting better when they understand certain ways of giving back to it. But yeah, I mean, it could be really simple too, like just getting started off. I mean, ideally, like, you could be doing a full living soil thing, but if you just want to mix some amendments with some nice potting soil. Well, one thing I like is pumice instead of perlite. And getting some nice worm castings, or ideally making your own from your compost, but making sure you don't let too many unwanted critters get into the indoor situation. That's where the problem comes in. It's just like, I want to just like be able to use any compost or living soil in like whatever cool way that you want. Outside, everything stays in balance. But second you go inside, any little extra critters can get out of balance. There's nothing to regulate them. And, so you don't want your thrips and your spider mites, and you don't want your fungus gnats, and you don't want all those things that are, different flies that might like compost. So being wary of how you avoid all that kind of stuff. I think Bokashi is a super useful tool, because if you just mix like an amendment, let's say you're using, a really good one is like Dragonfly Earth Medicine makes those nice products. Their Radiant Green is a nice one to mix in. But like just inexpensive stuff is fish bone, azomite, or just straight trace mineral, some kind of fish meal or kelp. Of course, that's bringing stuff from the ocean, and you got to think about like how you feel about, what's going on in the ocean. But I guess, we've polluted everywhere. So I don't know, you got to deal with it. I love all the minerals that is stored in kelp, and the nutritional quality of fish bone. Plants seem to really like it, and Bokashi seems to eat it really quickly. And compost teas, just having a high quality compost, some good quality fish hydroslate, and good amount of air in a bucket. It's a real simple thing to do. And it's a fun thing to do, like looking under the microscope too. And it becomes a whole nother part of the cultivation experience, because you're like, now you're actually thinking about the microbes. And, so just putting some good some good compost and some clean water. And I've been using rainwater, because I have a nice rainwater catchment system put in with Dan of High Tide Permaculture a little bit ago. He's also the one that has been a big influence on developing the Regenerative Cannabis Farm Award and a lot of the permaculture techniques that we put forward. And he's been working with compliant farms and helping people come into environmental and regulation and compliance in the cannabis world. Sorry, just a little tangent there, but it's awesome to be able to work with the rainwater, because it's like, it just comes from the sky. It's like the pH is fine, there's nothing in it, and you get to bubble up some really clean compost tea that way. And then after like 24 hours or so, then it's fun to look at it under the microscope and see what you got going on. See if you get, you can see the fungal hyphae growing. You can see the clusters of bacteria. You see like the forest systems that are created from the fungal networks that begin to develop, the mycelial networks. And you get to see the protozoa like roaming through these forests and going around and eating all kinds of stuff. And like, when you start to like know what kind of life is healthy, and that it's an oxygenated environment, then it's a pretty simple and fun thing to do. I mean, it's just some food like kelp or fish, really good quality compost, water, and a bunch of air. You want to have a good aerator, and I don't go with stones, just go with a straight pipe. You just want it to bubble.
There you go. I didn't know that one. There you go. I'm going to be getting rid of that air stone. My question, it kind of relates to when I was chatting with Josh and Kelly of Dragonfly. They said that when you get your property or your soil to like the level yours is obviously at, you can even start to see different cannabinoid profile expressions when, maybe your mate grows it out and he's like, yeah, it's, there's no CBD, and then you grow it and there's a little bit, or like just there's a different profile basically. Do you feel like when you really get your microbes working for you and you've got your own little environment churning away, that you can get that altered expression?
Well, I mean, again, genetics is first. You're not going to all of a sudden see a type 1 variety like, that's all THC, just all of a sudden have some THC, some CBD in it if it never has before. That doesn't really happen. And vice versa with a few different things. But like, something like CBG will be affected on harvest time or environment potentially. But there's just certain things that are just set into place with the genetics. But certainly the levels, are going to be play, it's like how much THC is in this one. And, maybe in type 2 varieties, there might be a play and the percentages, but you're not going to just all of a sudden see THC or CBD out of nowhere where there wasn't any in that genetic to begin with. But with terpenes, you are definitely going to see some different things happening. And certainly stresses could bring out different compounds being produced. And but another thing too, though, I mean, genetics seem to kind of at least dictate what dominant terpenes are going to be and the order a bit. But like, again, the percentages could change. So all of a sudden there's like, there's, instead of it producing 2% terpenes, the whole plant's producing 4.5% terpenes. And that's way different. And maybe the order's a little shifted, but the genetics are going to dictate a lot of that. So you're not going to see super wide changes normally, but you do get different aromas, different expressions, different potencies, different qualities. A lot of the differences you're going to see are in look too. Like, what did it go dark because it was colder out, or did it did it dry out more, or was the wind just like ripping it, or like, these environmental things are going to mean a lot about the end look, and that also means something about the trichomes. And then the curing process is just massive, though. That's really going to mean a lot too. Like, are all these trichomes damaged? Did it get too hot? Did it stay wet too long? Did it dry too fast? Like, that's going to just affect, what terpenes are there quite a bit. So yeah, it all goes into it, but like, there's certain things that just genetics lock into place, and they're not going to change that much.
Yeah, of course.
But actually, I'm really excited about looking into this a lot more. And, there are cool things like the Grow Off that have done this with clonal varieties in different locations. And, they actually noticed one terpene that hadn't been produced by any of the other of the plants. It might have been the eagles. But it was only 2 plants that produced it, and both times it was a super stressed environment. They're like, when they asked the grower, it was like, so it could have been a terpene because it wasn't in any of the others, like at all, no non-detect. And then there was like a considerable amount, like, was at the near diol, I think that was. And so there's a good chance that stress would affect that. But being able to look at those kinds of analytics with control groups will be really useful. And I'm looking forward to doing that this year. I want to do that actually with not just clone varieties, but with tissue culture too, so it can make sure that I have more control on that, and, see what like a black dog or cherry lime dog does in a few of the different really cool farms in our areas, showcase like the difference of a dry farm or a forest or a mountaintop with some of the good farmers here. I want to, doing that with time lapse too, and having that linked up with the weather data collection as well, which is happening with the Appalachian Project. There's like 9 weather stations going in that are going to be collecting all this cool data. And being able to put that all together, you can do a time lapse of the plant growing throughout the whole year and look at all the different weather data at that exact time. And then you could take that all the way into the drying and curing process, and then look at the end analytics of everything, and, learn a lot about those different spots and start to build, real data on how genetics are affected by different locations.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly goes to show that there's just so much work to be done in the field, isn't there?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. Because I always think, my mind always goes to wine, because I just think of like, there's established terroirs, or even cheese, stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, they've been working on it for hundreds of years, and they're really getting it in place now. So we got a while to go. But and
then when you think of like the example of like Erazin, you just had on like those appellations, like when we're talking about a variety that's just so adapted to growing, close to the equator, or so adapted to being in the mountains, or being, a certain place north or in the desert, and the attributes that go with that, like that's like real like land appellations. But then also the rich human history of cannabis in India and people in India is just amazing, you know, and like just so many multi-generational farms and just decades or centuries or thousands of years of relationships in certain areas growing this plant. Like that's like another level of appellation, you know, when we're talking about, well, yeah, we've been growing, you know, these hybrids and clones here for like 2 decades or something, or 3 decades or 4. It's like, it's just a different thing. And a lot of the farms are like, especially in the legal thing, are like relatively new. And there was a time when people were just only growing clones too. It was kind of funny. It was super weird that I had seed plants in males. Like it was like this totally crazy thing for a cannabis grower to have. It was just clones. So yeah, I don't know. I think we have a lot of work to do to define our area, but at the same time, California has been this freaking epicenter of just being the current moment of cannabis. Like we've been, you know, as far as like innovations and breeding and the culture and the hash and all of the things, it's like, I mean, there's just so much of that work comes from the culture here. And it is a special thing to honor and to acknowledge. And, you know, it'd be nice for these craft farmers to be able to have that kind of recognition, like a wine appellation, where it's like, yeah, you are from this place and you are doing these practices, and, you know, and then the way that we mix that in with genetics too will be interesting. Of course, we need to do it in a way that's like super open, and that encourages, farmers to do what makes sense for their place. I don't want anything like, you know, it's like, we know what like a Pinot is and we know what a cab is, but like, you know, we know about those grapes and those cultivars, but we don't want monocultures in cannabis too. We want the farms growing lots of different varieties, and then we want them breeding for it, you know, and like Green Source Gardens, like, breeding those multi-generations on that spot. That's building towards an appellation, and year after year, utilizing their forest and their barnyard waste to build soil fertility. Like that's the kind of stuff that we need to be talking about and honoring. It can't just be, oh, you grow this one type of thing in this one place and anything goes. It needs to be more special than that. And it needs to be open for innovation. But I super look forward to the way that the genetics tie into that, because like if you do have a special genetic, you know, that your farm becomes associated with, or you work with a breeder to develop in that place, like we should talk about it and celebrate it, and you know, also have some marketing power and being able to say that it is what it is. And so yeah, it's exciting how to see how farmers will be promoted, I guess, and you know, the way that it will hopefully help farmers to, well, as things become more international. I mean, I feel like the world will just open up, that the cannabis prohibition is over. It's just how long it will take worldwide, and hopefully we just see the entire end of the war on drugs. But as that happens, you know, being able to really, because it already is special everywhere in the world. You see crazy prices in the UK and Spain and different things for something that was grown in Cali. And as Irazin also mentioned too, the insane prices in India for really high quality, or, you know, yeah, I mean, what you know, dank weed or whatever, just going for just a tremendous amount of money. It's just staggering, really, to think about, and how much cannabis is in India, and how having something that looks like it's from California is worth that much money. So that's real perception. Those are real things, and hopefully it gets backed by the best farmers and breeders, and it is a real thing that the world gets to know that they are, you know, getting that kind of quality, both in practices and genetics.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important, right? And I mean, on that note, you know, as we approach the quickfire questions, I wanted to ask you, it feels like historically the reason why these precedents sort of exist is because you've got, your high times and your whatever, which, promote certain types of cannabis, and you look at that and you're like, oh, that's the bee's knees. However, in recent years, we've seen events like High Times and some other notable ones, even like the Emerald Cup, have kind of shrunk in size a little bit. But we've seen, on the other hand, the uprising of more kind of community-led things like the Regenerative Farm Award and the regenerative farming conferences. Do you think this trend will continue in that we might see some of the bigger corporate ones get a little less popular and some of the more grassroots ones grow in size? What's your kind of predictions for that?
Well, shit. I mean, I don't know if I have any predictions in COVID world for events at the moment. I think the way, some of the, award-based stuff, we'll just have to be creative this year. I mean, it's always my hope that it will continue in that direction, and so far I feel that it has. Like every year at the Emerald Cup, I feel like there's just amazing talks and there's amazing flower, and it's and more awareness. But I don't know what the future of the larger events are in the really near future right now. I do like the idea of utilizing the fact that large events aren't really like the appropriate thing to do at the moment, and getting creative with in online ways of getting this kind of information about cannabis medicine out through contests and stuff. So I like playing around with the different ways that we can really explore something fully, because we can choose what we then curate to go online and to and you can really dive into a lot of information. I'm not, do you know the Cultivation Classic in Portland?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Cool. It was an event that I helped start. I was working on from the beginning, and a lot of the concepts with it. And it was the Regenerative Cannabis Farm Award also was a part of that from the beginning too, and kind of that idea towards living soil production mixed with just really good science and analytics. And what was really cool is the last 2 years it's adapted its contest into more of a real patient study. And Dr. Addie Ray of Smart Cannabis and Steph Bernhardt, they had built this platform with Smart Cannabis where they get about I think the year before it was 150 patients or reviewers or judges, and that fulfilled actually a wide demographic of different genders and backgrounds and ages and all of that. And then they each are trained in sampling each one, and there's space in between the sampling, and they can fill out how they're feeling as they sample each different thing, and all that information and data is collected and put together. And then of course the analytics are run on every flower, and they do these really nice posters with that include the terpenes as a full donut, all divided up, so you can immediately see the terpenes and the different percentages that are there, and so you can quickly see, okay, it's a myrcene dominant, like beta caryophyllene number 2, and then there's a line that shows all of the cannabinoids, and it's a really nice long panel. It's got everything in there, and then it's got also a intake picture of the flower and a resource innovation score. And a resource innovation center started this power tool that basically gave a energy efficiency score to the operation, to the farm or grow. And then it also had an aroma intensity score on that too. And so there's a whole like wall of or hall of all these posters up, and so you can look and see all the type 1 and type 2 and type 3, and you can kind of see the way the terpenes group and different things, and you can just get a lot of analytics like all laid out in front of you all quick. And then you get to hear about how the different varieties affected the different people in the group, and they have different awards that are kind of interesting. Like one would be the nose. And so everyone that said that they really liked the aroma of something also really liked the effect. And the one that was most consistent for that got that one. I think that was Tropicana cookies or something. And then there's other things too, like the most consistent cultivar. So like if everyone says, yeah, it made me sleepy and happy and described like the same terms of the effects, then that would be really consistent, where maybe something else, like somebody's super energetic and somebody got couch locked, so there's a lot of different ways to look at, awards and, what is the best and what are we looking at, and best for who and for what, what was women's choice, that's another category. And these are all really useful demographics for retail, but also for medicine and also for people just to kind of start to begin to know like where they want to start with a cannabis variety if they're working with a certain issue or. So I see that curating different science-driven and also quality and experience-driven events like online could be really useful. I've been having some fun ones with different ideas with enjoying hash and different flowers and really diving into both the science and then just the gourmet aspects, putting that all together. I think there's a cool future for it, but it's going to adapt and change this year.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, you raise a brilliant point there. If someone was just looking for not anything in specific, just good stuff in general, what of your lines are you currently really vibing with that you would just recommend across the board, people being like, you'll be pretty happy with this?
Yeah, see, I always have trouble with that question. Normally when I work with someone, it's like, okay, we're going to sit down for 4 hours and we're going to run through your farm and we're going to work backwards on each thing. And, I'm going to overwhelm you and then we're going to work it all out at the end. So no, it's like, for what, no, I don't, but yeah. I mean, for ice water, for just really beautiful flowers. Okay, I'll just list them off. Let's see. Okay. Well, again, I mean, we already talked about cherry lime dog and the multiple different versions of that. Definitely would be excited for how that will look as more things get released. Black Dog is just the good old flagship and always available with Humboldt Seed Organization. Probably, yeah. Looking forward to some new things with Neptune soon. Actually, I'm kind of been slacking. I just like to put everything together really well and need to get on that. I think Banana Dog's going to be really useful for a lot of people. It just yields super well, super easy to grow, grows fast, crazy healthy, super resistant. Works great for flowers or ice water hash. Good, chunky, beautiful flowers that look insane in the jar, but also yield like crazy. Just real, simple, great one. Voltron has been amazing. Really, really powerful, strong flowers for sure. You get that lemon, butter, pepper, and some dough and just super powerful. There's just a write-up with that with Alpenglow had grown some of those. Other ones, the Orange Valley Dog has been really fun. That's a really bright citrus, incredibly high THC numbers, seeing in the high 30s regularly, saw 34. And hallucinogenic, when I first saw it, I was like, is this real? And then I hit it and it was just like, whoa, I'm in high school hallucinating, but it was that kind of, it's bright energy and just super strong. And but the smell is just wonderful. It's total bright orange candy, citrus and gas. And looking forward to what Mood Main Farms is going to do with that this year, and also they're doing some of the Cherry Moon version of the Cherry Lime Dog, which will be super fun to see. And this is the thing that's really exciting to see too, is like the different farms do the different versions of it too. And so Bryceland Forest Farm is going to have these amazing Cherry Lime Dog F3s, and they're going to be totally different, unique, and amazing. They're different. They're totally different paths that I was going down from the cross. So yeah, it'll be really fun. You'll get these dark, just freaking cushy, freaking amazing flowers from the Cherry Moon, and then the Cherry Lime Dog is like just so, the F3s, just so much bright, crazy fermented fruit goodness. And yeah, it's going to be fun to see. Other things, the Holy Nano Crack like crosses and stuff are just insane for hash and for resistance. I've done the Citron is really nice. The Mandarin crosses. For CBD too, the Canadog was really interesting, and actually has had some really unique terpene expressions too that have to look back into, because they might be total I don't know. Yeah, they might be important. They might be important ones. Yeah, good like apple, lemon, and kind of orange peel flavors in that, and those are like nice 3-to-1s. The Sapphire Sioux that Moon Made Farms actually doing again. There's a few farms doing that, and Newcomb Family Farms too. The extracts that came out from the Newcomb Family Farms project with Surprise are just incredible. Holy crap. Yeah, some of the best CBD I've ever tasted out of a pen too. They made some in the pens. What's really amazing with this is solvent extraction too, but
yep.
with that extraction is it's just homogeneous. Like, you don't have the crashing of crystals and the separation of terps. It's like this super homogeneous mix, and just so flavorful and consistently 2-to-1. Yeah, it's just like I don't really like pens. I could smoke on that thing all day. And the Cherry Lime Dog tastes insane out of that too, from the same farm. It's called actually Lime Pop Dog in this case, because there was a little lime pop mixed in with that one. But those are from Surprise and Royal Key, which really fun to see those. Papa Bark, I washed some of Sabertooth's Holy Nana Crack times SFV Dog. That just the flavor was so good, so good. Yeah, it was really cool to see that come out. Really love that farm too, Sabertooth Farms. Other exciting things, the dog named Sue, the Harless Sioux crosses with Black Dog come out. Really, really desirable, cushy, beautiful CBD nugs. They have a little bit more of the some of the CBD spice and myrcene and stuff that's more associated with it, but it has this like earthy, good cushiness. And they also come out CBD rich quite often too, which is fun to see. And what are some other ones that are standing out right now? I should just look through all the plants. Athena Dog, always, yeah. Athena Dog and Dog's Gift are both really fun. So yeah, my Athena Sour Kush number 2, which I call Asks 2 a lot of times, which actually one of the plants behind me right now is a Ask Nana. It's an Athena Banana SFE dog. But yeah, those Athena dogs look amazing, and Highwater Farms is going to be growing that dry farm this year, and those are going to look amazing, and I'm sure be available at the urban market too. And those are massive size trichomes, really just, yeah, again, gorgeous plant and flower, beautiful long leaves, but also with that hybrid like thickness look to it. And yeah, the flowers just fill in like crazy, and they sparkle like jewels, and the trichome size, yeah, just massive. You catch some really big heads. God, some other standouts too. I'm looking forward to seeing what the GMO banana SFE dogs do this year, which I was just calling GMOB. those are going to be, hash monsters. There's not really any way to get around it. Anything that the dad goes on kind of turns into a hash monster, and it's going on GMO. So it's going to work out. So I have, there's a few farms running that, and it'll be really cool to see all the percent yields that we're going to get from the plants this year. It'll be really exciting for the next year's selections and those progress. And yeah, Indigo Farms growing some of that. Newcomb Family Farms growing some of that. I think Bo's Nose is probably going to wash some, and surprise, surprise, we'll wash that too. So excited to see those. Fuck, I could probably keep going.
I love it.
I don't know. Should I though? which area do I want to dive into next though? The P-Funk. P-Funk is pretty fun. Actually, this year, this is kind of interesting. So our friend Ryan and Charlotte they have a chocolate company called Aura Chocolate where they do probiotic chocolates. But they're also doing they have really, really nice chocolates, and they really like sourcing the best quality products, and they work with all the like kind of regen farms and the Dragonfly Earth Medicine Pure farms, and they've been really connected and engaged in that community and been great friends too. But they also had a relationship with this studio where a lot of really cool songs were recorded, and one of those the plant, and one of those was Atomic Dog, and I happen to have a Atomic Kush crossed with Black Dog and Atomic Dog that Moongazer Farms in Mendo got from me years ago and continued on with, and we ended up doing they grew Atomic Dog last year that we went to actually meet with George Clinton and went to a Parliament show, and basically like he was down to do the Atomic Dog. So there'll be like the George Clinton approved Atomic Dog from Moongazer Farms. It'll be pretty fun. So I'll have to work more with that, but also working on this P-Funk right now, which is this really bright purple, funky, incredible smelling variety that was it was a sour bubble atomic that was put on Skyscraper Skywalker OG, and I called that Skyscraper, that combo, and that was put onto this Girl Scout A30 selection from 2011 that I had kept, and ended up choosing a male from that and putting that onto the Skyscraper, and it came out super just crazy funky and dark and amazing. And this year I put the Orange Valley Dog on that, and I have that like right behind me here too, one of these, the larger one back there. But the stem rubs are just insane, just unbelievably like bright and fermented berry and citrus, and very excited about those too. And some of the prettiest leaves, just massive, gorgeous fan leaves. And then it's gonna be really fun this year as each different thing starts to show. Because first I do the earlies, I do some depths too to get pollinated, and then I start moving on to like the full season early varieties, and then all the others. And I can't wait to start playing with all the cool stuff from Erazin as they're just starting to show sex right now. And I'm gonna propagate some more of the low lab together, isolated, and just to make more to play with too, and multiple others. God, there's so many cool treasures that he has in there too. I'm excited to see what the Hunza do, and the Bloxstan, some of the hash varieties, the Milana, Wailing Valley, Shilawathi. It's going to be really cool to see everything.
Wow. That's really exciting. That's so cool. And I think that's probably got to give people a pretty good range of options to select for.
Oh God. Yeah. I went a little crazy with it. Next year I'm going to do a few less and do larger population groups, but I just kind of wanted to see everything because I'm so excited.
I think it's great. I love it. I love all the info. So I think that brings us to our quickfire questions, which I've been excited to get to because I feel like these have just gotten better over time. So my first question for you is, what's the most memorable cannabis you've ever smoked in your life? Or it could be hash either.
Well, actually, I kind of mentioned a few of them already. So the crackhead that I mentioned back when I was in high school, still think of that smell. It had this like musty mango, a little bit of that cat piss like linger in the air, and just the second you smelled it, you were already stimulated in the brain. So super, memorable. I'll never forget that aroma and effect. And yeah, it was just such a shared experience. Like, all the friends were just like, oh my God, like that's just the perfect thing to, for a show or, going out and having fun. Also around that same time, that golden indica that I mentioned too, which actually I bred it just ended up getting a purple variety, which I just called purple indica. And like that had this like thick, beautiful earth cushy, but with cotton candy. And I can just think of one of these guerrilla grows right now and like, bringing it down in a backpack and that cotton candy smell in the air when it was all fresh and gooey. And that smell will never escape me.
Lovely.
What's another? The cherry lime dog from last year, for sure. The selections, some of the best smells of my life. What else? Tasting that the puppy breath from Garden of Greece. It was one of my favorite experiences of this year. And honestly, like the first time it hitting actually the Athena Sour Kush, the first time Adam washed the fresh frozen of that Simply Adam, that was it was like feeling like you won the universe and got kicked in the face with like a lemon golden boot at the same time. It was just like, I don't know, it was just so good. Just pepper and earth and butter and lemon and just insane potency. And then the cleanliness of his wash, it was just like, it just didn't even look possible how clean it was. Like in the way it melted. It's still like, surreal because that was like, when it was still like, that's bubble hash, like that's possible, it was at that time too. So that one still sticks out to me. It was really cool is actually that was like really expensive at the Emerald Cup one year, and maybe the most expensive out of anything, and it sold out so quickly. And I remember one person like had wrote a post about how that I was tagged in. They went to the Emerald Cup on their birthday, like drove 9 hours on my birthday to go buy the most expensive hash I've ever seen, or like the most expensive hash I ever had, and then drove 9 hours back home and then like tasted it, and he was like, best birthday ever. Like, and then 2 years later he made another post where he'd bought two and he pulled the other one out of the fridge, like, and it had cured. It just looked unreal, just the golden jewel of just perfect cure of. Yeah, I mean, it was such a pure, pure expression of what trichomes can be when you separate them perfectly. I mean, what Adam did with that was art, and the way it was grown too. But so it was really cool to see him like pulling that out 2 years later, like a fine bottle of wine, and that's how it is. It's like, and it was like at that time, it was like, damn, I'd buy that back from you for like 3 times as much right now, because that's special, So
yeah. Well, there you go. All of those sound phenomenal. I guess on the other end of the spectrum, what's a strain in which everyone else was really into it, and so you were like looking forward to it, and then when you tried it, you were like, this doesn't really do it for me?
Actually, I mean, I like the flavor profiles of most of the popular varieties and stuff. I like the candies. I like the gas. I mean, those cookies and Skittles and OG. I like all those flavor profiles. They're great. I mean, But it also really depends how it's grown. I mean, cookies can be so terrible, like in cardboard and dense, and Skittles is a weak plant. It's like, it's not always super exciting to grow. But when you get it going in living soil, really good, it looks good. I have it crossed with the black dog right now, some Z dog that like actually right behind me if you're looking at the thing, and it's so healthy and well structured and beautiful. And so I don't know, excited to see. I mean, what happens from that? Because I love that flavor profile, but I think certain things could be better about the plant. But I also think a lot of these cloned varieties do get viruses over time. I'm pretty darn sure of that. The hop latent virus is pretty prolific, and people cut from one plant and then they cut to the next plant, and don't really have protocol. Like even like you probably should be using bleach in between everything, and keeping your clones clean and knowing your source and all that kind of stuff. But so some of those things that that's where tissue culture makes sense, but it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. So you want to do that with those flavors that are really worth preserving. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if a lot of people like a flavor, I probably like it too, as long as it was grown well. So like if there was something like that, I'd probably blame it on the grower first, if everyone liked the certain flavor. But everyone has the things that they like more too, and it's like I'm not smoking hazes on a regular basis, but I appreciate their quality a lot, and I enjoy that. I love celebrating all the variety, but certain things click with other people more, and a lot of times, like what I find myself smoking a lot will be I really like the complex and savory flavors where it's like you're getting a meal, and you get that with like some of the Athenas and the banana crosses and the black dog crosses sometimes. But like the Voltron and stuff too, where you get butter and dough and lemon and pepper and stuff. I like those a lot, but I want gas, and I want citrus, and I want candy as well, because those are like really addictive through the day. It's like there's a certain like, you take a quick snapper and it like the way it hits your tongue and it just sits there. And the first time you hit I remember, first time hitting OG and being like, okay, yeah, I like that. Like, might as well cross that in with a lot of things. Cause like, yeah. And also like if you're, spliff smokers too, certain things stand above the tobacco and work really well. And also like, become the flavor that you want to sing over something and to be on your tongue, and you keep reaching for it. And it's always interesting to see like what jar like just goes first, and it might not, there's a certain flavor profiles where it might be something that's like, oh, this is so good and I like it so much, but you don't want it all the time. And other ones you're just like, I want to smoke this all day. It's all different. So how about you? Are there any that stood out for you, or you're like excited about trying something and then didn't like it?
Yeah, good question. I think that, I think that I've had some OGs that were so good that it made others seem not as impressive. And I think that's interesting. Yeah, because I think the most memorable weed I've ever had in my life was just this random OG I got one time. And I don't think I'll ever find out what cut it was, sadly. It was just really special.
Nice. Well, yeah, I mean, like I was saying earlier too, I was just like, we had a lot of cuts of OG, but so many of them are so similar. And I just, honestly, like it was the practices that really mattered, because it's powdery mildew susceptible, and and so like the people who really knew how to grow OG and make them work in the depths, and like knew the timing and the trellis in and what they needed for their health and stuff, like it's just night and day, because it's a lot of people could fuck up OG, and you'd still get that gas like singing over, and they could still sell it okay, if it, as long as it had that gas smell or flavor. But it would be like, dang dude, that looks a little small and discolored and little PM, and like actually I'd like to see a little PM on OG, because at least they didn't use microbial on it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. First of all, if you had to go live on a desert island and you can only take 3 strains with you, what 3 are you going to take?
Oh man, really good OG cut. uh, cherry lime dog, and probably, yeah. I would take one of the either Canada Dog or Sapphire Sioux selections for like a nice 2-to-1 that has tons of flavor.
Lovely. That's a nice little well-rounded pick there. So the next question, which I really enjoy, is opposite end. Someone who you're not particularly fond of, you've got to drop them off on an island and leave them with 3 strains. What 3 strains are you going to leave them with?
The same, because they need
good
to.
Man.
Yeah, they need all the help they can get. So
I love that. That's a very diplomatic answer. I respect that.
Maybe Black Dog too, because it's good for getting their mind in the right place.
Yeah. It makes people cooler. So what's your prediction for the next big flavor to take the scene by storm?
Cherry lime dog. For sure.
I love it. Confident. Alrighty, so brings us to our last question, and I'm really interested to know what it's going to be for you. If you could go anywhere around the world, any time in history, to presumably collect seeds or clones, where would you go, and what would you be trying to grab?
Any time.
Yeah.
Shit, I go run around with Deepak Razin from just last year. Looks like he. A lot of cool pictures from his trip.
Yeah, I agree.
But it would be. I also would be interested to just be, Humboldt or Santa Cruz, at the moment when like the first hybrids were kind of happening between, something like a Mazar or Afghani with some of the stuff that was coming from South America. It'd be interesting to be a fly on the wall those couple years and see what did take place between that beginning, because a lot happened from that moment.
Yeah,
it's a combination of surfers and back to the landers, and both people who, whether vets or peace activists avoiding the war or trying to get out of, just trying to get back to the land and relate to growing their own food and connection with nature, and then also the surfers traveling around and bringing stuff back, and like that, where those kinds of things met. I think something really special came from that. So it would be interesting to see those first hybrids, who did them and what happened.
Yeah, I can certainly get behind that. So
just from, being California, Northern California based, growing up in Santa Cruz Hills, it's an interest to me, but I'm sure there's a lot of better answers too. I would love to see so much.
No, it's a brilliant one. And so with that in mind, I think that just about brings us to the end of things. Did you have any comments or shout outs you wanted to make at all?
I feel like I made a good amount of them. Again, of course, incredibly forever thankful for all the information and the genetics from Erazin. Always Humboldt Seed Organization. Brian has been an incredible part of this journey for me. And much love to Eric too. And just, I mentioned before too, but shout out to Janine Coleman for all her work towards the Appalachian projects right now. And just all the amazing regen farmers too. I mean, we mentioned a bunch of them, but they all deserve it. I'd like to, Sunroots Farms, I don't think got mentioned, and their breeding and their cultivation work is incredible. The velvet herbs and the massive plants that they grow, and the biodynamic cultivation strategies and compost buildings that they apply to their practices are amazing. Mood and Gazer Farms, Mood Maid Farms, Bryceland Forest Farms, Flower Days, just all amazing farms, doing really cool work. Radical Herbs, a biodynamic farm down in Covelo as well, and Yeah, big shout out to Mean Gene, Freeborn Selections, for just always putting out tons of information and some of the tastiest varieties, and just being a cool dude and a good friend and great person to just talk about cannabis with forever. Big thanks to you, because I love being able to intimately listen to a lot of these people that I respect. I get to gain so much information by just listening to them talk. So big appreciation for that.
No, the pleasure's been all mine, my friends. So, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge, and especially, your positivity around breeding, around organics, regenerative farming. It's been really knowledgeable and insightful.
Oh yeah, one other shout out to Mama Publishing, and they did the organic grow book that ended up. I did a lot of kind of consulting with them as far as like a lot of the living soil based stuff and the hugelkultures, a lot of information, the kashi, and they made this amazing book out of it. They ended up having chapters about me in it, and different cultivation strategies. And there's one about black soldier fly composting, but so they ended up adapting this incredible reference book about organic cultivation, and they turned it into a comic book. And it's like a super cool comic book. It's got all these amazing little hilarious detailed characters, and it really dives into what's happening with living soil and the relationships between plant roots and the environment, and then goes into all these different practices like fermentation and biodynamics and natural farming and permaculture and hugelkulture, and but in really fun illustrations and in really user, really readable and fun ways that like kids and all ages enjoy. Bubble Man actually just gave a big shout out to it earlier this week. He was just like, "Oh my God, I love this thing." I'm just going, love reading this to my kid, and like all this information, super legit. So it was really fun. Like pictures that I'd taken and things that I wrote were turned into comic books, and they have me as like a little kid thinking about compost and like and fire and like the similarities, and then it just has me on this whole like journey. It's like pretty funny. But anyway, so that's like, it just got, they did the UK version, they did the French version, they did the version for Spain and South America, and then they just did the Italian version. So it's pretty cool to see all these different, these concepts spreading around in a way that's like great for kids to read. And just look forward to the next generation thinking about just how important living soil is in our relationships with plants and community.
Yeah, what a beautiful sentiment. So thank you again for coming on the show, and everyone be sure to go check the book out. It's the
Organic Grow book in comics.
Big thank you to Jessie again for taking the time to come on the show, share his incredible knowledge, and to talk all things organic and regenerative gardening. Make sure you go check out and support our fantastic sponsors at Seeds Here Now, best seed bank in the game, got all the best breeders. If you're thinking they're a good breeder, they're probably on Seeds Here Now. Go hit them up, check them out, guarantee on germination and satisfaction. I don't know why you'd go anywhere else. Likewise, a huge shout out to our friends at Koppert Biological. Beneficial bugs, beneficial predators, beneficial microbes, and even feeds to keep the good army alive, help fight off the bad guys. It's a no-brainer, guys. Go check them out. And finally, a big shout out to our buddies at the Patreon gang. These guys are the lifeblood of the show. We love you so much. Hope you guys enjoy listening to this one early. If you're interested in hearing the next episode before it comes out, go check out the Patreon, patreon.com/the podcast. And that just about does it for this one, gang. I'll see you for the next one. We'll see you.